Okay, hello and welcome to the live stream for June 21st, 2017. My name is Dana Morningstar, and if this is your first time here, this is something that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we go for about 2.5-ish or so hours. If you have a question for the live stream and you're not comfortable asking it in the chat, you can always email me at deardana@thriveafterabuse.com and I will do my best to get to your question. So we've got lots of people hopping on tonight. We have Lydia and Mel and Mala, Donna. Welcome, welcome. How's everybody's week going? SG is here. SC is here. So Tom is here. HG and Hoel, Dawn, Gamer, Christina is here. Hello, welcome. Carolyn says, "Hi, Dana. Your channel has helped me so much." That is so awesome to hear. I'm so glad. And if you haven't already joined a support group or my support group, highly recommend that. There's many out there. You can Google support groups for narcissistic abuse. I have one on my website and then I have one on Facebook. I always encourage people to join a handful of different ones because every group is run a little differently and, just different personalities in every group. So it can be beneficial to join a few of them for that reason. My website is thriveafterabuse.com. If you're looking for more information, you can go to the support group tab and find out more about the support groups there. And I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but just so you guys know, there's many support groups out there that are free. So my support groups are free, just in case people were thinking, oh, I don't know if I can join one or if I can't afford to join one. They're just so you know that most of them are free. uh, Lydia is asking about a trauma psychologist in the Berkeley, California area. I do not remember mentioning anybody, and nobody comes to mind. Was it a book that we were talking about? Let's see. Mala says that she went to go see her divorce attorney and had cold feet. Why is this happening to me? Divorce is always hard. No matter how bad a relationship is, no matter how short a person's been married, how long a person's been married, divorce is difficult. It's a big change in general is scary and difficult. And it's a big decision. So I get it. I get it. I would encourage you to start journaling about this. Write down like what are your hesitations about this, kind of what fears are coming up about this. So I think the more clear you can get about your hesitation and what's going on, the more that'll help you to better be able to address those specific issues. Because so much of things that we fear are very kind of nebulous, and it's really easy for fear to just overtake us if we're not clear on exactly what it is that we fear. So maybe kind of writing those things down and then brainstorming, okay, kind of what's my plan? How can I handle this fear? And then address them one at a time. Gamer Christina says, how can I be okay with telling people no without having to justify my reasoning? Isn't it rude to tell someone no without explaining? So this is a great point. saying no and setting boundaries takes practice. And unfortunately, there's no way to necessarily get okay with it without just doing it. And the more you do it, the easier it will get. And then you'll get to a place where you can't even imagine like not setting boundaries. And you'll find too that the people, like your people, the people that respect you, you'll have no problem saying no to, because odds are they're going to have healthy boundaries too. And so, and also let me just touch on this. When we talk about boundaries and saying no, sometimes it's not as direct as saying no. Sometimes it might be something like a friend saying, hey, can you drive me to the airport tomorrow? And you can't comfortably do that because you have plans or you have to work or what have you. You wouldn't maybe necessarily say no, but you might say something like, oh, I have to work, or I'm sorry, I've got plans. So it's some type of, it's still, you're still saying no, but there's kind of like you're phrasing it in a, this is why I can't do this. So, just letting people know, like, hey, I've got to work, or hey, that's, I use the example often. For a long time, I answered my phone 24 hours a day, especially if I had a friend that was in crisis. And I've had a lot of friends over the years that have been in a lot of crisis. And it got to the point where it was really impacting my health. Like I was staying up all night, getting, involved in these really intense conversations, and, it was not working for me. And so finally I had to tell my friends, hey guys, from here on out, I'm turning my phone off at 9:00, and I'm going to make that last hour at night just time to wind down. Like I'm just not, and I didn't make it their fault, because it's not their fault, because I hadn't set the boundary. Like, so that last hour between like 9 and 10, that's going to be my time to just unwind and read or what have you. And I'll just catch you tomorrow. And honestly, everybody was totally fine with that. And so they know and I've gotten to the point now, I don't even have my phone on ever. My volume is always turned off. So that way I'm not in a state of reaction. I'm in a state of response. So I look at my phone when I want to look at my phone. Now, granted, I don't have children, so it kind of makes it a little different, but I look at my phone when I want to look at my phone. And then I call people or text people back when it works around my schedule. Things are so much easier. But at first, when you're setting boundaries and doing that, it's going to feel really uncomfortable. And if you have kind of some strong personalities in your life, or people that are used to you always saying yes, there's probably, especially children, there's going to be some pushback to that. So, you have to kind of just play around, especially with children. It can be a little difficult setting boundaries later on in life. Because if kids, if your child is 12 years old and their whole life you've always said yes, and they've gotten away with everything, and they're the ones that are running the household, to all of a sudden start drawing boundaries, to them, it might feel like you're being mean and cruel, because they never had limits before. And so like with children, it can be, I've found it easy when I was working with like troubled kids to explain boundaries and to kind of set them up to succeed. So saying things like, okay, guys, we're going to school. I mean, of course, everybody knows we're leaving the house at 7:30, and then reminding them at 7:00, okay, guys, half an hour till the bus leaves. Everybody make sure, hair brushed, teeth brushed. Have you had breakfast? Do you have your homework? We're leaving in 30 minutes. And then again at 7:15, hey guys, we're leaving in 15 minutes. So there were no surprises, because before, they came from environments where they maybe didn't make it to school on time every single day, or their parents didn't care if they went to school at all. So it was a very unsettling environment for them to all of a sudden have structure. So I think setting people up to win can be really helpful when you're dealing with children. But yeah, as far as like work or friend, like adult friends, that kind of thing goes, if your boss says, hey, can you stay late, or hey, can you work during lunch? Just say, I really value my lunchtime, and that's not going to work for me, but I definitely work on that project, after lunch. Or if somebody's flirting with you or making you uncomfortable, to say something like, hey, this is really making me uncomfortable. Or, and the thing is, the more you get used to setting boundaries and asserting yourself, it's just going to be so much easier, and you're not even going to have to really think about it. In the beginning, I think a lot of people oftentimes will make up excuses because they're uncomfortable with they're uncomfortable with asserting themselves. So they might say something like, if a person's flirting with you and it's making you uncomfortable, initially a person might lie and say, oh, well, I have a boyfriend, or I've got to go now. And they make an excuse to just up and leave. I think it's part of the learning curve with just getting comfortable with saying no. But like I said, the more you can practice it, the more you'll eventually get to that place where, you're comfortable with asserting yourself, but also your body language lines up with that. So a lot of the people that are going to be pushing your boundaries kind of learn early on. You'll pick up on so many of these little kind of micro expressions and a lot of their problematic behavior early on. And you'll be able to kind of get out of the way before things get to such an extreme point that it's really, really impacting your life. So let's see, Kevin was talking about going to the dentist. So yay you for addressing that. I know that's been a huge thing for you. Let me pull this computer a little closer. This chat is kind of far away. There we go. Okay, this is another great question. Suzanne says, Dana, I've read that narcissists behave the way they do as a survival mechanism. I think of survival in a literal way, like living or dying. How would they be dying in an authentic relationship? Great question. So that term, like survival, threw me off for a really long time too. And you might hear about people talking even about codependence, and how oftentimes codependence behavior is kind of this ingratiating behavior that a lot of us have, with not setting boundaries, with putting everybody else first, with people pleasing, with avoiding conflict. That kind of behavior is our way of trying to quote unquote survive our environment. And for a long time that threw me off, because I was like, how, surviving it? That seems a little bit strong. I mean, my childhood had issues, but I mean, because I felt the same way that you did. I'm like, surviving it seems like I was being held hostage, or it was really, really, really extreme. Surviving, what they mean by surviving is basically kind of navigating your way through that environment and getting your needs met. So it's not the definition of it isn't as extreme as the word may sound. So with narcissists, their behavior, that kind of continual fight defense, I think of it in terms of not so much a survival mechanism, because that does sound extreme, but a defense mechanism. And we all have different defense mechanisms that kick on every day. And some people, if those defenses kind of kick in at a young age, then their personality forms around them. So it's the same kind of the opposite side of the coin is codependence. Like I was talking about, our defense mechanism tends to be this ingratiating type behavior. So what book was it in? Is it The Body Keeps No, it's the Pete Walker book, the CPTSD book. And he talks about this, the different defense mechanisms. So there's fight, flight, fawn, and freeze are kind of the main ones. So with codependent people, we tend to be more in that fawn category. And by fawn, it's basically like friend. Like we tend to just always work towards a solution. We're very friendly. We're very people pleasing, very ingratiating. And that's our way of quote unquote surviving things. Narcissists have their defense is that fight mechanism to where they're just always at war with everybody else. And they've killed off this, they're like kind of like their authentic self because, you know, and what I mean by that, like your authentic self is also known by the term inner child. And like your inner child is your thoughts, like who you really are, like your thoughts, your feelings, you know, your wants, your hopes, your dreams, these kinds of things. And so I think frankly, most adults have that suppressed. It's not even just from like from their parents, it's from culture or religion or peer groups or there's any number of factors that can make a person really suppress their authentic self. But with narcissists, it's thought that to really truly feel that level of emotion and connection to other people makes them vulnerable. And at some point in their life, bonding to somebody has caused them a great amount of pain. Or maybe it was a lack of bonding to somebody that caused them a great amount of pain. And so they avoid that at all cost. Like it's not, to them, it makes them vulnerable, which makes them weak. And they don't like that feeling of being weak. So they have they bond to people at a very superficial level. So when we might say something like, I love you, right? Or I love my brother, or I love, you know, my cat, or things like that, where there's this level of, and we mean that to be like, I, you know, really care about this person tremendously. To them, when they say like, oh, I love you, it's so shallow. There's no depth there. It would be like us saying, I love ketchup, or I love seltzer water, or I love ice cream. Like there's just not that level of depth there. And this, because there's no sincere deep bonding, that's how they're able to go from person to person to person. So they can verbalize like, oh, I care, oh, I love, oh, I, you know, have these types of emotions, but their actions show that they really don't. So, and that's kind of the great irony. So the more you're trying to get them to communicate and be solutions oriented and work towards being, you know, like to work towards being a team, right? Because you're trying to like find a solution. Like, why does our communication always go off track? Why do they keep cheating? Why do they keep lying? Like, we'll just get into therapy, or we'll just keep talking this through. And then they tend to just shut down. And if anything, they tend to just get better at hiding what they're really up to. And, you know, you're dealing with this false self who, for any number of reasons, has learned to not attach, and who really gets those emotional needs met, especially their self-esteem needs met, through using, abusing, and exploiting people. Whereas the rest of us tend to get our self-esteem needs met from like being a good person, or you know, setting a goal and achieving it, or kind of like healthy, kind of team-oriented, adaptive ways. But they have very like maladaptive ways of getting those needs met. Okay, and then Leslie says, hey, Dana, I keep hearing that with a narcissist, it's never over. I'm confused because I thought they were done when they discard you. Please explain. I'm divorcing my narcissist and he's upset. Why? So there's a couple of things here. So when narcissists are all about power and control, and for them to not have power and control over a situation or over their target it makes them feel incredibly vulnerable, and it just really rocks their world. they also feel entitled and justified in having power and control over other people. That's what makes them so problematic. And so when they start losing that power and control, they get really, really upset. So you might find like, you're like, okay, we're divorcing because they've continually cheated on me. And now they're upset with me, making it seem like I'm the bad guy for somehow hurting them. But all they've done this whole time is cheat on me and lie to me and steal money. And like, they don't even seem to acknowledge that they've done anything wrong. Like, they're acting like they're the victim of me. This is so twisted. Like, what's going on here? And a lot of people, when they get to that place, they often wonder to themselves, like, maybe I am the problem. Maybe I'm the narcissist. Maybe, could I have all of this bad behavior and just not know it, because the narcissist has twisted it around? Because anytime you set a boundary, you stand up for yourself, you say no, they lash out and they're like, oh, well, you're so selfish and difficult and emotional. And, they blame you for everything. And it's just, it messes with the person's mind, like at an epic level. But as far as, are they, when are things over? And you thought that they were over when they discarded you. It depends on the narcissist. Generally, there's a lot of them where they target people based on supply. And if they know that they're getting to you and they're upsetting you, it makes them feel superior. So it kind of feeds their self-esteem. It makes them feel important. So those kinds of narcissists tend to keep coming back. It's like being bullied. Like, they just kind of keep coming back, and they'll provoke you, and they know how to get under your skin. They'll post memes on Facebook about abuse and how they're the victim. They'll post things about how much they love their kids when they haven't paid child support in a year and haven't bothered to even call their child that whole time. They'll do, all kinds of things that would enrage a normal person, especially one that's been on the receiving end of getting abused. So the best way to get them to leave you alone generally is to go no contact if you can, or at a minimum, just go gray rock and not show any type of emotion. Like, don't let them know that you're getting to them, because the more you're showing a reaction, the more they're feeding off of that. But so with kind of the discard and all of that, and them continuing to come back around, it's something, I don't want you guys to lose sleep over it, but just realize that that's a very real possibility, that they can continue to try to bother you and provoke you and what have you, even if they get remarried, even if it's been 20 years. And so I encourage people to go ahead, plan ahead for this. If you can block their number, block their number. If you can go into your email, set up their emails to go directly to spam. If you're getting bothered on Facebook or Instagram or if you're getting phone calls from blocked numbers or messages from Facebook accounts that you don't recognize, or friend requests from people that you don't recognize, like these kinds of things, sometimes it's really worth the peace of mind to change your phone number, to change your email address, to change your Facebook name, sometimes to move and just get a fresh start. So it just kind of depends. It depends. But I think it's helpful to know that this is a possibility, that they might continue to just resurface out of the blue. And when they do, it's often like nothing happened, which is confusing and upsetting all at the same time. So if they do resurface, don't let that knock you off balance. Just play it cool. Like, you haven't, like, you don't care, that they don't even bother you, that it means nothing to you. Just don't even respond to them. And because they're looking for a reaction. They're either wanting to upset you so they can blame you for being difficult and that you haven't changed one bit and that you're so abusive and poor them, or they're wanting you to be, hoping that you're thinking maybe we can be friends, and that you're trying to be nice to them. And then now they're going to continue to either suck you back into the relationship or suck you back into like their pipeline, where now they're going to, continue to message you, and they might talk to you about other people that they're now dating, and try to play it off like, well, I thought we were friends. But really the whole goal of that is just to dig at you and to upset you, and then make it seem like there's something wrong with you that's upsetting you. This is why no contact is so healing. Support groups. If you're going through a divorce with one, I'm a big fan of support groups. It really can help. Let me scroll up here. Tom says, I'm struggling with contacting her to let her know all of the lies I have uncovered, but I know she will just deny it. Yeah, and that's the thing, is there is no closure with a narcissist, in large part because they're pathological liars. So you can bring stuff up, and also they can't admit the truth, because if to them they're never wrong. So they're either going to deny it, or they're going to blame you, or they're going to blame somebody else. Or if they do if they do acknowledge it and they're like, you know what, you're absolutely right. I'm so sorry. You can do so much better than me. I'm so tired of hurting you. And they're telling you all these things. If they're saying that, again, nothing that they say is sincere. If they're saying that to you, it's because it's a pity ploy, and it's designed for you to then get sucked back in and think, oh, well, maybe they finally seen the light. They finally acknowledge what they're doing is problematic. And for now to keep communication open with you. There's just, all we can do is shut the door and just drive on. There's nothing sincere with them. Lydia says, how do you know if somebody is a real narcissist? After being in a relationship with a narcissist, now I feel like everyone is. I know I'm in this hypervigilant state, but how do I know for sure? Great question. Very common question. I think we've all felt that way. I know I for sure did for quite a while. The question isn't so much whether or not a person is a real narcissist or not. Even though it might seem like that really is the question, it's not. It's more about their behavior. So put aside the label for a second, because it's not so black and white. It's not like, it's not like you're either pregnant or you're not, right? Or you have cancer or you don't. Personality stuff doesn't work that way. It's on a spectrum, and there's lots of shades of gray in that. What's more important that I encourage you guys to look for is toxic behavior. Like, what is problematic behavior? And in a nutshell, anytime you're being used, abused, exploited, or neglected, that's problematic behavior. And that's any one of those things is worthy of being a deal breaker. It really, really is. So it's very common for people to have a relationship with a narcissist, and it's so over the top in this kind of Lifetime TV movie type relationship where that's what brings them to the internet, and they start Googling or YouTubing, like, what am I experiencing? And, they're searching for answers, because they've been so confused for so long, not realizing what they've been going through is abuse. And so there's generally like that one initial relationship that brings a person to this place of searching. The next step after that is when people start putting the pieces together, then they start realizing, oh my gosh, I have a lot of problematic people in my life. And is it me, or is it them, or am I being hypervigilant, or am I being paranoid? Because it really seems like there are a lot of narcissists in my life. And just like you were asking, then people get fixated on, okay, well, is this just like normal problematic behavior, or are they a full out narcissist? And I will tell you right now, any problematic behavior is still a problem. So And this tripped me up for like years because I was stuck at that point, just where you are, where I'm like, well, it's not so extreme over the top, but it's still a problem. If it's a problem, it's a problem. So don't aim for normal, because normal is just different shades of dysfunction. Aim for healthy. Look for people, friendships, coworkers, people that you're dating, family that are healthy, that don't violate your boundaries, that don't use, abuse, exploit, or neglect you. Like, look for people that you feel grounded around, that you feel empowered by, and that you enjoy their company, and that you feel safe, and that you feel kind of cool, calm, and collected, and that you can be yourself, and that your feelings are validated, and that your hopes and dreams, are like nurtured, and that you can just be yourself instead of feeling like you're walking on eggshells, or that you can't have certain conversations, or that you're continually disrespected. But it's very common for people to realize, I have a lot of problematic people in my life, and I kind of need to clean everything out and just start over. And that can be a very overwhelming place to be. But it's very, very, very common, because just like with narcissists, this is their personality. And wherever they go, they're going to bring that with them. So in which they unfortunately never do, but until they have that insight into, hey, I've got a problem, like I need to actually work on things, they're not going to change. It's the same with us. Until we realize, we have to have higher standards for who's in our life. We have to have deal breaker behavior. We have to have healthy boundaries. We have to know what self-care is. We have to realize that we don't need, nor should we, tolerate being used, abused, exploited, or neglected in order to get love or respect. And like, once we can realize that, like, that's where a lot of us have been going wrong for any number of reasons. Either we were manipulated, oftentimes we were manipulated slowly, little by little, kind of led off that path into abuse, because that's how that tends to happen. I mean, most people that are in abusive relationships don't realize that they're in abusive relationships until the relationship's over, or until somebody says, this is abusive. But even then, like, if it doesn't match up with the person's perception of what abuse is, then they oftentimes will minimize it. So if they grew up with a parent who used to physically beat them, or like berate or belittle or yell and name call, then if their current partner is still like problematic, normal problematic, right? Like, maybe they're an alcoholic, or they're addicted to porn, or they're, they cheat a lot, or they, it's kind of all of these like subtle put downs, these kinds of problems. If it doesn't match up with what they consider abusive, like if their baseline for what abusive behavior is doesn't match up with what they're currently experiencing, they're most likely not going to realize that that's abusive, because they're like, well, what I'm going through is problematic, but it's not as bad as my dad, or it's not as bad as my ex-husband or my ex-girlfriend, or what have you. This is why I encourage you guys, make sure that the baseline that you're going for is healthy. Make sure that you're not measuring situations against extreme abuse, because I see that all the time too, where they're like I was just saying, like, what I'm in is problematic, but at least I'm not being beaten and raped. Like, that's really, really slippery slope logic, and it can really lead a person to tolerate a lot of all kinds of abuse unnecessarily, because they're not using the best measurement of whether something's healthy or problematic, if that makes sense. So back to your hypervigilant state. Okay, so now if you've decided, okay, my new baseline for measuring kind of people's behavior is going to be healthy. And by healthy, I mean open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. They're treating your thoughts and your feelings with dignity and respect. You're able to have a conversation. You're able to work towards a solution. You feel grounded and safe and secure with that person. Like, like that's healthy. Okay. So you're aiming for that. You're going to feel hypervigilant. Like you were saying, very normal. This, and everybody, this lasts for like a different time for every single person. When you're getting to know new people out there, the biggest thing is go slow. Go slow. So again, a lot of people get tripped up with this. I for sure did, where they think this abusive person was the problem and this was a fluke. So thank goodness now I'm away from this abusive person. The odds of this happening again are, you know, it was a fluke. Like they came into my life, they manipulated me. It was sort of like, you know, I somehow kind of got manipulated into joining a cult. Like, what are the odds that'll happen again? Like, probably not very high. It's not the same with abusive relationships. More often than not, people don't just have one. They tend to have multiple abusive relationships. And so it's really important that now that you're going about meeting new people, and here's the reason why. So when people get out of an abusive relationship, they feel like they have, I mean, I used to call it, I feel like I have mashed potatoes for brains. Like I just didn't trust my judgment. I didn't trust other people. I felt like everybody might have had some sort of hidden agenda. It was just, it messed with my mind on like an epic level. And so when you don't trust your perception of events and of people, then like it's really, really problematic. And so what a lot of people do is they think, oh, it's just me, I'm hypervigilant. So they go back to their old ways of thinking, where they're like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and take everybody at face value again, even though I don't trust them because I'm feeling hypervigilant. But I'm going to just assume that that feeling of hypervigilance is just 100% me because of what I went through. And so I'm just going to keep taking people at face value. I'm going to let them set the pace of the relationship. And, you know, and then next thing they know, boom, they've gotten tangled up again with another really problematic person. So it's really important when you're meeting new people, friends, dating, what have you, go slow and pay attention to how you feel. We were just talking about this in the support group. So there's this concept in the book, Psychopath Free, which I love, my favorite concept in the whole wide world. And it's the concept of a constant. So getting a constant is somebody that you feel consistent around, like consistently good, like safe, secure, calm, good around. So for example, for me, my brother is my constant. I never have to worry if he's got some hidden agenda. I trust him. You know, I feel like I can open up to him. We can have a good conversation. I feel good when I'm around him. If you can get that person, find that person in your mind. If like, who do you feel like even keel with? Who do you feel grounded with? And if you don't have anybody in your life, think about, okay, well, who, you know, is there somebody in the support group or maybe even me? Like, who do you feel like, okay, I feel, or Oprah, or do you know what I mean? Like whoever that you feel kind of even keel with, to think, okay, how do I feel when I'm talking to this person or when I'm around this person? And then have that kind of be your baseline. So if you're experiencing like squirrely behavior from somebody, then think to yourself, okay, do I feel like something's off with them? Because confusion is always the first sign of manipulation and abuse. So if you feel like something's off, and then ask yourself, okay, do I feel like this around other people, or is it just predominantly with them? And if it's just predominantly with them, then odds are there's some stuff that's going on there. And it would be a good idea to take a few steps back to where you can see things clearly and then proceed. But it's definitely a mistake to just assume that it's all 100% you, that you just have issues with men or commitment or, you know, what have you, and then to let them set the pace. Because oftentimes abusive people, don't start off as abusive. They start off as like Prince or Princess Charming. And so they'll tell you, oh, I would never hurt you. I want to be so good to you. It's all this like pillow talk, basically. And it's to, if anybody starts coming on intense and too much too soon, normal, healthy people don't talk like that, and they don't move that fast. So it's a really good idea to see that and be like, okay, like this is moving faster than I'm comfortable with. You set the pace. You set the pace all the time. So, if they want to talk on the phone, but you've got to go, then you make it clear, like, okay, I've got to work in the morning. I've got to go. And paying attention to how other people respond to your boundaries. There was another post in the support group where a gal was talking to this guy with online dating, and he kept calling her like pet names, like, hey, hon, hey, babe, hey, sweetie. They hadn't even met yet. And she told him, she's like, that really makes me uncomfortable. I don't like being called, hon or sweetie. And he didn't listen to her. He just defended why he was calling her those names. Oh, I just like, I just call women those names. And I just call women that I'm interested in. I call them those names. And so like that was a boundary push, right? And so we were discussing this, like, okay, if somebody, like a normal person, first of all, a normal person wouldn't start off with pet names right out of the gate. Like that's wildly inappropriate. You haven't developed that level of connection or trust with another person yet for them to have pet names for you. So, but then the fact that he wasn't listening to her and refused to stop calling her those names was another red flag, so setting the pace. And then she decided, okay, he didn't respect that boundary. So now the next step was, okay, we're done. Like this is going no further. So I hope that helps. Let me scroll down here. Yeah, Suzanne says they are predators. We need to be teaching this in junior high school. Yeah, I agree. And it's a good way to look at it, as it is predatorial behavior. And here's another thing real quick too, and I've brought this up multiple times, but let me bring it up again for those that are new. It's very common for a person, if you've been in an abusive relationship, let's say the person that you were with was more of that overt narcissist. They were like, quote unquote, like that guy or that girl who was self-absorbed. They were arrogant. They were obnoxious. They talked about themselves. They were grandiose. They were, it was all about them all the time. Very common for a person to go from that kind of relationship to the exact opposite, which would be a covert narcissist. So then they would fall for the narcissist that's very humble and charming and wants to make it all about you and calling you or texting you all of the time and pet names, and they want to listen to you and on, like that kind of stuff. Because if you've experienced that overt side, it can feel healthy. That covert narcissism, when they're fresh out of the gate with that love bombing, and right away, it's like the fish are jumping in the boat. Like if you're a fisherman, the fish are jumping in the boat. They're so into you right away, and you can do no wrong. And if anything, you feel concerned that you're going to somehow let them down. And they might be telling you that they were abused before and that their ex cheated on them, or that all they want to do is just love somebody. And they're seeming like very vulnerable and charming, and it can create this whirlwind situation very quickly, where next thing you know, you're telling, like intimate details about your previous relationships and your life and your hopes and your dreams and all of this to a person that you really don't know. And then that's how they lure a person in. The same goes for a person that might have dated a covert narcissist. This was my experience. So dating somebody that was Prince Charming, and so everything I've ever wanted. The next relationship after that, I dated a person that was a lot more overt. And even my friends were like, this guy's kind of a jerk. He's really selfish and he's just kind of all about him. But I thought, it was this kind of weird thought of like, I was terrified to date a nice guy because I dated this really wonderful guy, but he turned out to have a double life. And I think he was trying to kill me. And like, it was crazy. So to me, in my brain, I'm like, okay, Prince Charming is dangerous. So I need to avoid this snake in the grass. And so I went to date the guy that was like the snake in the road. It's weird. It's the things that our brains do. And so then after that, because I was like, well, I don't like that. I mean, this guy was like, just, it was all about him. And I could do no right. And I would just give and give and give. And I'm like, I feel like this guy is an empty bucket because it's never enough. And then boom, the next relationship was with somebody that was a lot more covert. And it was because a lot of this stuff wasn't registering as problematic. But now that you know this, now that you know, like, what are the signs, what are warning signs of overt problematic behavior? What are the signs of like more covert problematic behavior? Now that you know this, you can be better prepared for it. Sort of like with, like online dating scams. When those first came out, and you had these princes from Nigeria that were emailing people telling them, oh, I trust you so much, and I got your name from somewhere, and I'm going to send you, $1 million, and you can keep, 100,000 for yourself. I really need your help, and I appreciate it. People were falling for that right and left. And it's not necessarily because they were stupid. It was just nobody knew that was a thing. And it wasn't until like lots of people got scammed out of money that they realized, okay, now we all know, right? Like I would say like the vast majority of people know if you're getting emails from a Nigerian prince offering to pay you money, it's a scam. Same thing with dating sites. If the person has an accent, but yet they claim to be from your area of the United States, but somehow mysteriously they're an entrepreneur or they're in the military or they're, an engineer working on this project overseas, but then they're going to be back in 2 weeks, but then they start hitting you up for money, it's a scam. But it took a lot of people losing their life savings before the word got out of this is predatorial behavior. This is how it all goes. So, and I guess too, the other point or the other part to that is, it's very common for people to feel paranoid and hypervigilant and to not trust their judgment, and then to look to turn towards friends and family and say, is this legit? Like my spidey sense is going off, but I'm not sure. And depending on how kind of, in tune your friends or family are, the odds of them giving you good advice is also it's a total gamble. I mean, again, I had a situation, this was probably 10 years ago. I was looking for a new car and I was on Craigslist and I found this, and I was married to a guy in the military at the time. And I came across this listing of, it was like a Jeep Cherokee or something. And the guy was selling it for like $4,000, but it was like a $12,000 vehicle. And, and he had said he was in the military and he was deploying or he was transferring and he couldn't take it with him. And in the world that I was living in, that was actually very common. It wasn't unusual at all for a military person to buy an expensive vehicle and then move and then sell it at a discount for whatever reason. So, but it didn't sit right with me. And I had called a friend and I said, hey, this is what's going on, but it kind of feels like a little too good to be true. And she was like, oh man, you should just go for it because I mean, he's going to be wiring funds to your account. So like, what could go wrong? And thankfully I didn't move forward with it because I just didn't have a good feeling about it. But anyway, the point of that is trust your judgment, because other people might unintentionally kind of steer you off course. And that's the thing too with abusive people or exploitative people, is they promise this too good to be true scenario where their target is thinking like, I need hard proof that this is actually a problem, because what if I could have gotten this, $12,000 or whatever dollar car for $4,000? Or what if this person is really Prince or Princess Charming, but I just have issues? And so they're afraid to walk away from like what could be the perfect, amazing thing because of their hesitation for it. But I will tell you, if it's something that's right for you, you won't feel that way. And it will still be there, especially when it comes to relationships. So just take things at a pace that you're comfortable with. Okay, Lizard says, Dana, hard proof is exactly what I'm struggling with. I feel the need to go back to see it. Lots of people do. Lots of people do. They're like, well, maybe it's bad, but is it that bad that it's worth leaving? Or maybe there was some sort of explanation for it. Maybe he had a bad day. Maybe it's because she had an abusive childhood. Maybe I pushed buttons. Maybe this could be fixed. Maybe, it was only yelling. It wasn't name calling, or it was only name calling, but it wasn't anything physical, or it was something physical, but it didn't result in bruises, or it resulted in bruises, but it didn't result in broken bones, or it resulted in broken bones, but I was never raped. Or, well, I was raped, but I didn't, it was only every now and again when he was drunk and I was sleeping. So, I mean, it's not like he had a knife to my throat. Do you see how that's a slippery slope into really dangerous situations? It's so easy for us to rationalize what we're experiencing, thinking that we're making too big of a deal out of something. And it goes back to, if somebody's using, abusing, exploiting, or neglecting you, it's a problem. And any one of those things is worthy of being a deal breaker. Any kind of abuse is a problem. Any kind of abuse is not normal. And it's for sure not healthy. It doesn't matter what your friends say. It doesn't matter what your family says. It doesn't matter what you grew up with. It's not verbal abuse, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, spiritual abuse. None of that is normal. It's not normal. It's not workable. So it's, write all of this stuff down. I'm a big fan, because it's so, I've been there, I get it. It's so easy to start justifying this to ourselves. And because it's denial is what it is. Like when we wish the situation was something other than it is, that's when we quote unquote start forgetting. That forgetting is denial. And it's powerful, powerful stuff. And it's happening at a subconscious level. So it's really important that you can keep your thinking at a conscious level. So it helps to write out that list of the for when you miss him or her. And in that list, you're doing bullet points of everything that they did, all of the reasons that you're leaving. And so when you do feel those moments of nostalgia or you're missing them, you pull out your list and you go back through and you read it, and it'll snap you right awake. It's this, and it's the same thing with any type of denial that a person's experiencing. If you've gained a lot of weight, and you're wanting to lose weight, and putting all of the reasons, all of the painful moments, like my clothes no longer fit. I'm really struggling with looking at my body in the mirror. I don't like what I see. I have no energy, like making this list and putting it on the fridge. So it reminds yourself that, okay, something's got to give, like something needs to change. Same thing if you're struggling with alcohol addiction or drug addiction or whatever, getting clear, like this is a problem because I got a DUI, or I made a fool out of myself at my son's 7th birthday party, and you make it painful. And so when you read that list, you're like, yep, no more justifying it. No more thinking, okay, well, maybe I don't really have a drinking problem because I've only had 1 DUI while my friends have had 3. Or it's not really a problem because I only drink 6 beers a night, whereas my husband drinks 10. Or it's not really a problem because I haven't, gotten a DUI yet. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's really getting leverage on yourself as to, this is why this is a problem for me, and this is why something needs to change. Okay, let's see. Okay, Monica asks, is constant criticism abuse? Or how about sarcastic comments, hurtful jokes, or making fun of your sensitive side? Yes. So all of that is abuse. Verbal abuse is often defined as anything that's diminishing of another person. All abuse grinds a person down, whether it's physical or psychological or emotional or verbal, spiritual, sexual, financial. It's all designed to get power and control over another person with the intention of grinding them down. And so what you're describing, that kind of verbal abuse, is often the hardest to pinpoint because it can really fly under the radar. It's like, well, but they're not calling me names and they're not yelling. So maybe, am I too sensitive? Am I too emotional? Maybe I just can't take a joke. It's really easy to second guess ourselves because that kind of abuse can go on in public, and it can go on with friends and family. And if other people are thinking, oh, if they're twisted, right? Like if they're toxic and they're thinking this is funny, then it's not registering as a problem for them either. If anything, it might register as, boy, this is awkward, or her partner is kind of a jerk, but it might not register as abusive as it really is. And it's that kind of abuse is so like insidious and stealthy, and it just grinds a person down without them even realizing it, because it plants seeds of doubt. And then of course, if a person says anything and they're like, hey, that really hurt my feelings, or wow, that's not cool, because the abusive person had, in their mind, they can do no wrong. So they don't see it as a problem because to them it's funny, right? And they'll often do those things. Like they'll use like brutal honesty, or what they consider to be brutal honesty. It's those subtle put downs, those subtle digs. And sometimes, it could be something like, let's say you mispronounce a word and they say something like, oh, it's so cute that you're so ignorant. Or no. I mean, it's really cute. Like you're from a small town and like, you're just a redneck. It's cute. It's cute. I find it entertaining. I find it sweet. It's right. Like those kinds of comments that implies you're not intelligent, you're less than. And then over time, the target of that starts not speaking up so much, and they start really second guessing themselves and feeling like, man, maybe I am just kind of this, redneck country bumpkin and then they start becoming very self-conscious and, feeling like their partner is intelligent and that they're lucky to be with this person. Constant criticism, undermining a person. Everything that you do, you want to go to college to study art, and they'll tell you, no, you should really go and you should study engineering or nursing instead. You want to wear a dress, they'll tell you that you look better in pants. You want to cut your hair, they'll tell you you look better with long hair. You grow your hair long, they tell you you look better with short hair. It's that feeling of you can do nothing right. And it undermines a person's trust in their abilities and in themselves and in what's possible for them. It's huge. There's a fantastic book out there that I highly, highly recommend. You can learn more about it on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, under the book club section. The book is called The Verbally Abusive Relationship, and it's by Patricia Evans. Fantastic book. I have a ton of notes on my website if you want to just read those, but I highly recommend getting the book and reading it, like probably more than once, because there's so much in there. It's just fantastic. And she goes over many different types of verbal abuse. And a lot of it is really that kind of covert, subtle stuff. And yes, everything that you're talking about. So some other examples of that would be like, okay, making fun of you. So, or like cruel teasing. So maybe, so here's an example. Okay, so I'm short. I'm like 5'1". If somebody were to continually tell me, you're so short, you're so stubby, you're just so squatty, like that all those clothes look really funny on you because you're just so short. To a person who's on the receiving end of that, there's that kernel of truth in it, right? Truth is, I am short. And, but all of that other stuff that's layered on top of it of, you're so stubby, those clothes look funny on you, what is it like to be you? That kind of stuff, it impacts a person's self-esteem and it grinds them down. Another example, here's an example. My mother was teased by her narcissistic father for years about her big ears. She doesn't have big ears. My mother is 74 years old and to this day has always had had a haircut that covers her quote unquote big ears. She will not show them. If I remember one time I was like trying to tuck her hair behind her ears to just show her, I'm like, you don't have big ears. They don't stick out, like they're fine. And she was almost in tears because her father would continually, call her Dumbo. He'd pull on him and make all these jokes that weren't funny. And it gave her this total complex about her ears. So sometimes there can be a kernel of truth in something that somebody's saying, and sometimes it can just be totally made up. But either way, asking yourself is, am I feeling diminished by this person's comments? And how would they react if I were to start criticizing them nonstop about something? Like odds are they wouldn't like it. A great example too of kind of, and here's the other thing too about jokes. If a person tells you like, this isn't funny, don't joke with me like this. And the person continues to joke with you in a way that you don't find funny, that's bullying. Like that's not okay. So whether or not you're too sensitive doesn't matter. That's your boundary. I've used the example before. For me, I've always been super jumpy my whole life. And I really don't like horror movies. I definitely don't see them in the theater. I really rarely watch them at home because they upset me. I can't shake them off. Like they'll stay with me for years. And I'm also very, very jumpy. People know this about me. So people know, like, you don't jump around a corner at me. Like you don't try to sneak up on me. It's not funny. Like I'm sure my reaction to them is hilarious because it's so accentuated, like it's so over the top. And, normal people don't just like flip out like I flip out. But to me, it's terrifying. It's not funny. And so the thing with that is if somebody's joking with you in a way that's not funny, they don't get to decide whether or not you're being too sensitive. Like that's a boundary push. So if you're saying this is not funny and they're like, oh yeah, it is, you're too sensitive, that person's a jerk. And they obviously are not respecting you, your boundaries, or your feelings. You know, most of us normally, if somebody says, hey, that's not funny, we stop. You know, it's important that people respect your boundaries and that we respect other people's boundaries. There's a video you've probably heard, this family, Daddy of Five, that was on YouTube. Their channel's now taken down, but they were targeting, they had a quote unquote prank channel against their son, Cody, who was, I don't know how old, he's 6, 7 years old. To me, these pranks, and I think to the vast majority of people out there that saw these pranks weren't funny at all. Like, they weren't even in the ballpark of funny. It was complete like psychological torment, and it was bullying. And, you know, and here they were videoing this, and this little boy is like obviously traumatized, because who wouldn't be? And his parents were like, oh, you need to lighten up. It's just a prank. And they weren't listening to him. And this kid was having, you know, more and more signs of trauma from all of these quote unquote pranks. And he was just continually being ignored and minimized by having an issue with stuff that was highly problematic. And, you know, thankfully they took the channel down. I think they lost custody of, I don't know if all of their children, but at least 2 of them. And because it's, you know, it's a big deal. Like, you can't, like, it's a big deal. Yeah. Truth Seeker says, Daddy of Five makes me weep. Straight up flashbacks like crazy. Yeah. Yep. I think so many of us, you know, if you've grown up with abusive parents, even, you know, like, you know, quote unquote, mildly abusive parents who didn't take your thoughts and your feelings into consideration, and it was just all about them all of the time, then, you know, then if a child grows up like that, then you grow up not feeling validated and second guessing everything and turning towards abusive people for like clarification or for validation, and thinking, well, it's just me, I'm too sensitive, or maybe I misheard that, or maybe I taking this, you know, too seriously, or maybe they didn't mean it. And we're so used to like justifying things that shouldn't be justified. Because if you've grown up like this, then in order to keep a relationship with that a parent who's been abusing, using, exploiting, or neglecting you, then you have to just justify or ignore or rationalize a bunch of really problematic behavior. And so that kind of stuff starts off at a young age. So if we started rationalizing stuff that a healthy person, that wouldn't even go on in a healthy household, but a healthy person would. And that's why so many people say, they're like, oh my goodness, why did you stay in this relationship? Because a lot of times to them, they're like, they're seeing things that we weren't seeing. They were seeing this problematic behavior early on. So to them, it's really easy to hop out of the way. But if you can't tell the difference between problematic behavior and healthy behavior, then a person, you know, you're lost in a fog, and you're kind of wandering around, and it's a real crapshoot as to who you have in your life. Because of course there's no shortage of abusive people that are going to tell you, that are going to continue to tell you, oh, there's nothing wrong with my behavior. I'm so sorry you took it that way. You know, you are too sensitive. You're too emotional. You know, I call you sweetie because that's the name I call women that I care about. Or, you know, you need to just man up, and a real man wouldn't be bothered by that. Or, you know, there's like all kinds of ways that a person becomes invalidated, and it's up to us, now that we know better, to have that deal breaker behavior and be like, there's no excuse for abuse, period. End of story. Doesn't matter if they had an abusive childhood, doesn't matter if they had a bad day, doesn't matter if they're frustrated, doesn't matter what you might have done. Like, you can't provoke a person. There's no excuse for it, right? Like, you forgot to clean up you forgot to pick up their dry cleaning. It doesn't give them the go ahead to start yelling at you or to cheat on you or to hit you. You know, you forgot to, you know, your child wakes up from a nap early, like well, you didn't even have control over that, and then you get yelled at. Like, there's no excuse for it. That kind of stuff, just no excuse for it. Gamer Christina, you're so welcome. She says, thank you so much for your words. Yes, you are so welcome. It's so validating, isn't it? Like hearing from other people, and not, you know, not just me, but like other people in the chat. And this is, again, like support groups are so fantastic for this, because so many people that are stuck in that fog of abuse, they're like, is it me or is it them? Like, what's, you know, is this a relationship issue or is this like their personality issue? And they can stay lost in that fog for a really long time, especially if they're surrounded by people that are giving out all kinds of well-intended bad advice, that are telling him, oh, you know, maybe he had a bad day, or she was really tired, or, you know, her mother's like that, or they're justifying it. And so if that's who we're turning to for like what's appropriate or reasonable, then we're going to continue to stay lost in that fog, and things aren't going to work until we can actually start to realize like what indeed is problematic. Sort of like people were talking about earlier with that word surviving your environment. Like the word surviving sounds so intense, right? Like you're surviving a war, like you're surviving a hostage situation. And for a lot of people that didn't have extremely abusive childhoods, that term seems like, oh, come on, give me a break. Like that's a little bit too extreme. It's the same with the word abuse. So a lot of people think, oh, well, it's only abuse if a person's beaten up and they're put in the hospital. But anything other than that is somehow like workable, reasonable behavior. You can justify it somehow. And it's not until we realize like what the word abuse really means, and that it comes in different forms, and that all forms are incredibly damaging, and that it's stuff to take seriously. Once we realize that, yeah, verbal abuse is a big deal, and it can drive a person to commit suicide, and it can cause a person to have PTSD. Same thing with emotional abuse or psychological abuse. You're not making too big of a deal out of it. You're not being overly sensitive. This stuff is a big, big deal. And it's just as damaging, if not more so, than any other form of abuse. You know, getting that validation is such a huge part of moving forward and healing. Nathan, thank you, gave a donation through the super chat. And he says, oh, interesting, great quote. He says, once I accepted that, I realized all of her insults were a great roadmap to the insecurities and traumas I needed to heal. Now her hateful words say so much about her and nothing about me, or anyone for that matter. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Nathan. That's incredibly insightful. And I love that. I love that. So let me kind of elaborate on that a little bit. So when people talk about, and Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong here, or if you want to add to what I'm saying. When a person is targeting a certain person in a certain way, and Nathan's talking about, okay, these are the areas that I need to heal. Oftentimes, if we're getting targeted, like how an abusive person goes about exploiting our vulnerabilities as an adult is often very indicative of these vulnerabilities that might have been there from childhood that we need to explore and then heal. So here's an example in my own life. So I grew up feeling very unloved and unimportant. And I didn't realize I felt that way. I didn't realize, because that was just my normal. And I didn't realize that it was a problem in my adult life. And I didn't realize that it was anything that I needed to work on or heal. And because I had this unresolved vulnerability, I continued to find myself in all kinds of friendships and relationships. I was falling for the love bombing and that like rushing of intimacy, where people were very quick to tell very deep stories about, their childhood. And I was very quick to talk about my life and my struggles and my childhood. And that created this whirlwind situation. And I just took everybody for face value because I'm just, I think we tend to see the world kind of through our own set of morals and values. So if we know that we're trustworthy, we think other people are too. It's kind of why thieves don't trust other people, because they know what they're up to. So they don't trust other people. But if we go through life thinking, well, I'm just honest and on the level, then other people must be too. Then that can really set us up to fail, because a lot of people are not. It's roughly 10% of the people out there are like really problematic people. So, only time will show you like exactly which 10% that is. Like that's where the skills come into play, because we don't know, nobody knows like, well, which 10% is problematic, and you have to just give it time and set the pace to that. So those were my vulnerabilities that were continuing to be exploited. Once I realized that, I'm like, it was so incredibly eye-opening. Then I could get busy filling up those empty buckets. I'm like, you know what? I need to really kind of get up some better support, like, some friends and some better friends in my life, and hobbies, and just be on the lookout for love bombing and set the pace, and, just be a little bit slower to open up to people. And again, it takes practice, but yeah, these relationships can lead to like a lot of insight. Let's see here. Let me back up. Sky Rabbit says, I don't understand and can't wrap my head around the cruelty. How can I go from a perfect husband to her enemy in a matter of days? She calls me her best friend and then destroys my life. It's so confusing. Yeah. So that running like hot, cold, like that kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, that is like a telltale sign of an abusive person. And I think it's maybe helpful to think about abusive people as far as like, they have so many deep-seated, like pathological, pervasive, persistent, like ongoing, problematic behavior that has nothing to do with you or me or anybody else. It might feel like it because they run really hot and cold. This shows like her unresolved issues and what's going on with her. To us, it doesn't make any sense because it's not based in reality. Like, she's just running really hot and cold. Like, that's not normal. But in her mind, because she's got all of this stuff that's unaddressed and that's really probably most likely very suppressed, that she might feel very justified in her mistreatment and her abuse. Like a lot of abusive people do. Because I mean, it just speaks to the level of like their dysfunction and their problematic behavior. There's not enough eggshells in the world that you or any of us could walk on to get them to change. Like, it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Right? I think we would all kind of like that to happen. I mean, the dysfunctional part of us would like for that to happen. The healthy part of us comes to realize we can't help other people and we can't fix other people. Like, they can only do that for themselves. That's a big shift to make, because too, so much of society has this idea of true love conquers all. People, it's important that, we work things out in a relationship. Commitment is forever. There's all of these ideas that push people into staying in abusive relationships. And like all of that kind of stuff it just doesn't apply if there's abuse going on. Yeah, somebody had described that kind of behavior a while back as, well, all of it, like the cruelty, the running hot and cold, the subtle put downs, the rage, the paranoia, all of this narcissistic abuse in general as being put through an emotional meat grinder. I thought that was a great way to describe it. And that's a sign of abuse. If a relationship is making you feel like you've been through an emotional meat grinder, it's toxic and you got to go. Like that's not workable, and it's just going to get worse. So a relationship shouldn't feel like that. Like that's not normal. There's kind of this other saying out there too that, never don't be with people that are bad for your mental health. Or you could say the reverse of that, only be with people that are good for your mental health. I like that. Like that's kind of a great way to kind of tell what's going on. So aim for people that are good for your mental health. Avoid people who are bad for your mental health. Yeah. SG is saying, feeling emotionally drained after each encounter. Yep. Yeah, that's a sign. That's a problem. Feeling, anxious, insecure, paranoid, rehashing conversations, thinking like, if I could have just reworded this a different way, would things be different? If they continually do silent treatment or up and break up with you or fly into a rage anytime that they're questioned or confronted or, something doesn't go their way, like that's abuse, and that stuff's not workable. Like normal, healthy, mature people are able to have a conversation. If you're feeling like you can't ever, like you feel like everything's an argument, things that don't need to be an argument, these circular conversations, you're leaving feeling frustrated and angry. And again, rehashing what happened and how did things get so off track. And, you just find yourself so annoyed. These are all signs that you're dealing, at a minimum, you're dealing with a very conflict-oriented person. And frankly, life's too short for that. So no more crazy makers, no more abusive people, no more toxicity. Lizard says, how many times do they break up with us? It's, totally depends. Some people go through that on a fairly predictable basis. Here's another sign, is if there seems to be kind of a pattern, like abuse tends to run in a very set pattern of that, like idealize, devalue, discard. If you're finding that on average, like every 3 weeks or every 3 months, there tends to be something. There tends to be some sort of fight that doesn't seem necessary, some sort of explosion. They up and leave you. They claim that they want a divorce. They, for no reason, like things just get squirrely. Things just go off track fast for no reason. And there's a pattern of this. Generally, you're in an abusive relationship. Like normal relationships don't run that course. Lou, that's a great point. Says, I didn't even really know what mental health was until last year. And that's so true. And, mental health has kind of almost become this like euphemism for mental illness, where like it's not really PC to talk about like mental illness. So people say, oh, well, mental health. But it's interesting because I used to be a mental health nurse, like a psychiatric nurse. And I'll tell you, it was not about mental health at all. It was about treating mental illness. And it's one of those terms that I don't think a lot of people really know, like what is mental health? And really like the core of it is like self-care and doing things that empower you and doing things that nourish you and doing things that are healthy for your state of mind, whether it's, like meditation or, getting enough sleep, or if it's, picking up a hobby or being around healthy people or distancing yourself from toxic people, or if there is mental illness going on, possibly seeing about getting it treated in whatever way that, you feel is best, possibly therapy, possibly, a support group, realizing that you matter and that your sanity, that your mental health is just as important, if not more so, frankly, than your physical health. And that you're worth it. Like, it's okay to relax. It's okay to take a day or a half a day and do what you need to do for your sanity. And you've probably heard me talk often about, it's really important that you keep yourself safe and sane, safe and sane. Those are those two like guideposts, you are the judge of that, nobody else. So you need to figure out, what do you need to do in order to stay safe and sane at any given time in any dynamic. It's important. It's important. So a relationship might not be putting you in physical harm's way, but if it's grinding you down, giving you anxiety, you're having nightmares, you don't trust them, you're depressed, you're losing weight or gaining weight, you can't sleep, or you're sleeping too much, or you're second guessing yourself, or you feel like you're going crazy, it's not good for your mental health. It's not good for your sanity. It's a sign that something's got to change. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. Cha-cha-cha. Hey, Montana Cowboy says, hello, first off. Says, you just finished reading In Sheep's Clothes, or In Sheep's Clothing, I think is the title. Awesome. We're doing that book club in next Thursday, the 29th, I believe it is. So you'll have to join us for that. And you guys can find out, I think, oh gosh, maybe I didn't. No, I think I did. You can find out more about the book club, the calendar, what we're reading and when, and discussing it and all of that on my website, thriveafterabuse.com. And if you want to join the discussion, it's always a live stream like this. It runs about 2 hours or so. Right now it's me and Lucy, which is great, but we would love to have more people join. So Lucy normally puts together a series of questions, and we're just getting this thing, giving it the attention that it actually deserves. So we're getting on it with like figuring out when I'm posting the questions and when all of this is going off my website. But you can go there, thriveafterabuse.com, go to the book club section. You can see which books we're reading. So that way you can, if you want to get them from the library or from Amazon or wherever, you can get them ahead of time and start reading them. If you want to join the book club, you can email me, Dear Dana at Thrive After Abuse, and then let me know, just say, hey, I want to join the book club. Then you can be on like a Zoom group chat where we discuss the different questions and all of that. And you can be in a video with all of this. If that freaks you out, which is understandable, we can always do it where you have the camera off and it's just your voice, or you can film, something in the background or what have you. We'll make it work. So that's that before I forget. And let's see. There is also somebody's talking about, Montana Cowboys talking about a book and about safe people. Since we've been talking about boundaries, and that's kind of been the theme tonight, has been boundaries. There is an article on my website. Yes, it's linked in the description below. It's called What Are Healthy Boundaries? This is a blog post that I did a while ago. It was inspired by Healing the Child Within, I believe. And it talks about, and there's illustrations about kind of what are healthy boundaries. So he shows this in his book, and then I kind of expanded on this topic. I love the way that he presented it because it was, he had, it was a visual, it was an example. It was fantastic, and it made so many things make sense. So check the description below for that, the link to that article. And I think if you're struggling with what's appropriate boundaries, that can really help. And again, dealing with problematic people, because they are so predatory and they can really make a person second guess themselves. So if you're trying to have healthy boundaries, their whole goal is to be able to, use, abuse, or exploit you. So you can't have healthy boundaries, because then they can't use, abuse, or exploit you. So they will start grinding a person down right away. So kind of like that example I gave earlier, where that guy was telling this gal, he was calling her sweetie. Whether or not he was predatory, frankly, it doesn't matter. Frankly, it's inappropriate. Even if he had good intentions, like, it's just not cool. But it shows a lack of respect is what that is. But because it's too much too soon. She tried to stand her ground and say, like, hey, that's kind of a little like weirding me out. And he made it seem like she was the one with the issue. Like, well, no, this is just how I talk to women that I'm interested in. And so many people, especially women, are really socialized. It's really important to be nice. They'd rather be nice and put themselves in harm's way than be seen as rude. And so, especially if you've been in an abusive relationship before and you're second guessing yourself and thinking, like, maybe I'm being hypervigilant. Maybe this guy has good intentions. I can't tell. And so what do we tend to do? What we tend to do is we tend to be like, well, I'll just stay in this situation that doesn't sit right with me until something really problematic happens. And then I'll have that clarity that I need, that this is indeed dangerous, and then I'll leave. That's really problematic thinking. And that, again, this all of these lessons for me have been hard won. So, please just know that, like, you're not alone in this. And I've talked about this before too. What sparked me to even start my website and to start seeking out support groups and all of this was, I had these two main over the top, like, Lifetime TV movie relationships with like double lives. And I think I was being poisoned, and like, it was just so undeniably problematic. And fast forward a couple years after that, I began dating. I dated this guy for about a month. And like the second or so conversation, I just had this like dark feeling about him. But he was handsome. He was incredibly intelligent. He was interesting. He had this really amazing life. There were so many things about him that I'm like, wow, I'd really like for this to work. But I couldn't shake that feeling, that dark feeling. And I had never, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I had never had that feeling, that sinister, dark feeling that early on in a relationship before. I'd only ever had it at like the tail end when that mask came off, and I was terrified, thinking that this person could kill me and not even care. And I couldn't shake it. And I was a freaking wreck. It was awful. And I was going, there was a friend of mine who was a therapist who worked across the hall from me, and I was constantly in her office. I was like, Gwen, like, this is what I'm experiencing. Is it him? Is it me? Like, do I have issues? Am I don't want to ruin a good thing. He hasn't done anything that I can really pinpoint at the time I couldn't pinpoint it. Now I could make a whole list of red flags, but I didn't feel justified. It felt like being rude. It felt rude to end this relationship for seemingly no good reason. But the reality is if you don't feel comfortable with it, that's a good enough reason. And it was around this time that somebody had told me, they're like, Dana, you've seen this movie before. You know how it ends. You don't need to sit in here and wait until the very end to get up and leave. That was the biggest aha moment for me, because before that point, that's what I had always done. I'd been like, things sure seem off with this person. I can't tell if I trust them. I think they might be cheating. Are they lying? Are they drinking too much? Things sure seem off. I don't know if this is a good thing for me. I don't know. Is it, like, this person seems really confrontational. This person seems like, and things weren't working. Things were kind of squirrely. Like, that was a weird comment. Why would they say this? Are things going missing? Like, just all of this confusion, this doubt. And it's like, I would wait until things, and basically until I was proven right to get up and leave, because I didn't want to, I felt like leaving without concrete proof was somehow not giving a person a fair shake. And it took me a long time to realize, like, no, feeling like something's off is a valid reason to leave. Feeling like something's not right enough for you is also a valid reason to leave. You could be dating a person who is awesome and fantastic, and things might still not be right enough, and that's okay to leave. Just in case anybody's wondering. So you have permission to do what you need to do in order to not only stay safe and sane, but to live like an authentic life, and to live an empowered life, and to find like your people that get you and that you feel comfortable with. And, it's okay. Scott says, yep, if your gut is telling you something is wrong, listen to it. Yes, your gut is rarely wrong. If something feels off, it's generally because something's off. So Montana Cowboy, no, Missouri. Why do I always think it's Montana Cowboy? Missouri Cowboy. Thank you so much for the donation, for the super chat. Much appreciated. Okay, Dora, great question. Says, hey, Dana, why do narcissists act so grandiose? So there's two kind of schools of thought with this. And so you have kind of these two main categories of narcissists. You have like your grandiose narcissist, and then you have like your vulnerable narcissist. And your grandiose narcissists tend to be overt, like they're like, quote unquote, that guy or that gal. They're the ones, the Kanye Wests, or the kind of, you could even say Kim Kardashians, but they're the ones that are so full of themselves. They're always taking selfies. They're always, talking about themselves. They're arrogant. They're obnoxious. And again, I don't know Kanye West or Kim Kardashian personally, but I'm just saying, just to give you an idea of perception. But, it's very, very self-centered to the point where it's hurting other people. So obviously just taking a bunch of selfies that's kind of like ridiculous, right? But it's not necessarily problematic. It's when a person's like using, abusing, exploiting, or neglecting other people because they need that constant validation. So grandiose narcissists, both types of narcissists need that constant approval and validation. The grandiose narcissists oftentimes are spoiled. That's why they're that way. So they're not necessarily like compensating for any type of like self-esteem deficit. Like they truly just think that they are God's gift, and they get upset when other people don't realize that. Vulnerable narcissists oftentimes come from an abusive or like quote unquote traumatic. That's another one of those words that seems like really extreme. If people think trauma, they're like thinking war or like a hostage situation or intense amounts of abuse. But the reality is, what a person, trauma, what can be traumatic for one person is different. It's different from person to person. Like, being in a car accident can be incredibly traumatic, just like a person being in an abusive household can be traumatic. But generally, if a vulnerable narcissist is a narcissist who grew up in some sort of traumatizing home, generally because they had a narcissist as a parent. And so they grew up feeling ground down and that they weren't enough and constantly criticized and belittled and, silenced, diminished in multiple ways. And so they grew up feeling not good enough. So they never really got that self-esteem bucket filled up. And so then their personality kind of formed around that. So they might still have moments of grandiosity where they are like, I'm going to be a movie star, or I'm going to, maybe they're like even lying about that. Like, I'm in the military, or I'm this really successful entrepreneur, or, these kind of grandiose fantasies, but their reality doesn't match that. Or maybe their reality even might match it. Like they might be like, yeah, I'm, a CEO or this high powered individual, but yet they have this like paper thin ego. And actually both types of narcissists tend to have a paper thin ego. Any type of like criticism, boundary setting, questioning, they fly into a rage. And with the vulnerable, so that the grandiose narcissists will fly into a rage because they think so highly of themselves, they get annoyed when other people don't. Vulnerable narcissists, you'll see them like crumble into like a little boy or a little girl. And your heart goes out because you're like, oh my goodness, like you see how vulnerable they really are. And it's that realization of you're dealing with a wounded child. And that's hard. Like it's hard to see that. It's hard. I mean, you just realize you're like, I'm not dealing with like a fully formed adult is what it is. So they need that validation and approval because they didn't get that as a child, versus like the grandiose narcissist who might have gotten too much validation and approval as a child. And so they're like, that's just where their bar is set. You either worship the ground I walk on, or there's something wrong with you. Get out. I'll find somebody who does. But like I was saying, the vulnerable narcissist can also be grandiose. But if there's any type of like ego injury, they just crumble, and it's so far outside the realm of like how like normal adults tend to handle conflict or criticism or rejection, especially. Like they might stay in bed all day. They might, like start crying. They might, they might kind of just start like going off on this tangent about, how they're not good enough and what's wrong with them. And, and part of that can be manipulative, but oftentimes it's off because that's how they really feel. Like their deep-seated wounds are being like brought to the surface by criticism and rejection. But then the thing is though, like as soon as you're able to kind of parent them, right? You're like, oh my goodness, it's okay. And you're going to be okay. And this is, you're trying to make them okay with things. As soon as they get that self-esteem bucket somewhat filled up again, like boom, they're kind of back to this, the abusing, the exploiting, the using, the neglecting. And that moment where you kind of thought that you bonded and that you were able to get through to them and have some sort of real human connection, it's like it's just gone. And if anything, they might even like resent you for that, because that's their weakness and they don't like feeling that way. Twisted stuff. So thank you. Got some donations on the super chat. Super awesome. Let's see, I'm gabbing away. Let's see who did that. Lauren, thank you so much. And Marie says, thanks for helping me heal for almost a year now. You are so welcome. And then Sanduga, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Thank you so much for the donations, guys. It's never expected, but for sure much appreciated. So thank you. Let's see. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Lucy. Lucy is talking about the book for the book club. I don't know if I made that clear. I guess I didn't. The book club for the next discussion is In Sheep's Clothing by Dr. George Simon. You can, it's an older book. It's been around for quite a while. You can find out more information about it on my website. And you can also find out, which is thriveafterabuse.com. You can also see, I think we have the rest of the books we're reading for 2017 on the website. So go check it out if you're interested. Let's see here. Jamie says, does anyone have any tips for not being hypersensitive since being newly out of my 17-year narcissistic relationship? I seem to think everyone is being critical and I'm taking things super personally. So, okay, so that would be another one of those situations where we were talking about earlier. It really helps to get that constant. Find your constant, whether it's, you know, a sibling that you have that you feel really comfortable with, a person, you know, that's in the support group, or me, or, you know, a parent, or it's somebody in your life that you're like, okay, this is when I'm with this person, I feel cool, calm, and collected. I'm not second guessing myself. They're not saying things. I'm not wondering if they're being critical of me. I'm not wondering if they're being snarky. I'm not lost in that confusion or that introspection, wondering, is it like, that's weird. Is it me or is it them? It's like somebody that you just feel like you can be yourself around, that you can just take a deep breath and feel comfortable with, whoever that might be. So I mentioned earlier, my constant is my brother. Like, I feel good. Like, I feel comfortable around him. He's a safe person. So get that constant. That's going to be your baseline. So when you're meeting new people, to kind of measure them against that constant. You know how you feel in this situation. You're not feeling confused. You're not second guessing yourself. When you meet this new person, if you're finding yourself being like, was that snarky? I'm not really sure. Were they being critical or am I being too sensitive? That's introspection. Is it them or is it me? If you're finding yourself doing that, compare that back to how you feel when you're with your constant. Because generally, when we're finding ourselves confused by what we're experiencing and we find ourselves wondering, is it them or is it me? It's them. So, and you might be finding that there's quite a few people in your life or kind of in a row that you're thinking, I keep feeling this way. Like, I keep wondering, is it them? Is it me? Is this weird? Is this normal? I don't really know. Generally, that's a sign like your radar, kind of for what's healthy, what's not, is still like your compass maybe is a better way to say it, like that needle is still kind of trying to find like its true north. So it takes a while. You've been in this relationship for 17 years. That's a long time to have somebody mess with your head. So it's going to take a little while for you to kind of get your sea legs about other people and about what's problematic and what's healthy, and to have your compass really point to true north. So your emotions really can be such a fantastic guide. And you might not feel like that right now because you're like, no, Dana, like I feel like I'm a hot mess. I feel like my emotions are all over the place. I don't trust anybody. I'm having nightmares. I'm anxious. I'm depressed. A lot of that is like the kind of PTSD like symptoms that can go along with abuse. And they can last for quite a while after a relationship. They can, they last different lengths of time for different people. And there's different types of treatment that you can do, which I highly recommend. There's EMDR, and then there's a treatment called EFT. And you can find out actually more about that on YouTube. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. You can do both of these therapies either with a practitioner, or you can do them like through guided videos through YouTube. But paying attention to how you feel. So if you think about kind of this like emotional scale, and how do you feel when you're around a situation or something that feels good? Like generally you feel good. You feel comfortable, you feel relaxed. You might feel like, so if you're thinking of it like this kind of scale, right? Like you feel comfortable, you feel relaxed, you feel at peace, you feel neutral, might be another word. You might feel safe. And then it kind of, if it's really exciting, you might feel juiced, you might feel empowered, you might feel excited, you might, feel alive. You might just, you're smiling, like it's really, really good. If you're starting to feel, and then the other side of that, if you're feeling confused, confusion is always that sign that something's a little bit off. It's more often than not, it's a sign of something that's problematic. But, that confusion, and then maybe resentment, and then maybe anger, and then rage, fear, insecurity, jealousy, paranoia, anxiety, suspicion, a feeling of uneasiness. Like all of those unpleasant emotions are generally a sign that something's out of whack. And in order to get things more in alignment, in order for your compass to point to its true north and get in alignment, generally what needs to happen is that your boundaries need to get tightened up, and you need to get back in charge, regain your power and control, and get a hold of the situation. What this tends to mean is something either needs to be said to somebody, like somebody's been slowly kind of pushing your boundaries and then doing things that you're like, this is not okay with me, or this is creeping me out, or this is just not comfortable, or that was kind of rude. Like that's how that starts. And then that kind of behavior feels like now you're losing sleep, you're feeling a little bit resentful, you're feeling angry, you're rehashing conversations. These are signs, okay, I need to do something different. I need to maybe be a little bit more assertive, or I need to distance myself from this person, or, I need to, just kind of be more assertive and put my foot down and be like, hey, like this is not going to fly. And that might need to happen. If it's worse than that, then even more of a correction needs to take place. You'll know when you're taking the right action based on how you feel. Like once you've found your true north and you've gotten more in alignment with like your kind of quote unquote authentic self, those unpleasant emotions tend to they're not like active. You might have residual unpleasant emotions. Like that's a lot of what PTSD is. Like you might feel anger, resentment, fear, depression from stuff that happened in the past. But to ask yourself, okay, are you feeling all these feelings because of current events that are like actively going on? And if you are, then some things need to change. You'll know if you've taken the right action when those feelings are no longer there and you're back to feeling like neutral or calm or safe, or you don't feel tense, like you feel like you can breathe. Those are the feelings that, okay, I'm more in alignment. Move towards those feelings. Move towards those feelings. Move towards what's giving you peace in your life. That's the best way to do it. So if you're meeting new people and you're finding yourself feeling like really hypervigilant and you were saying hypersensitive, this is a sign, okay, I need to take a few steps back and examine this. Am I really being hypersensitive, or are they saying some stuff that's maybe not too cool? Do I feel hypersensitive around other people, or is it just like these 3 people? Do I feel hypersensitive when I'm with my constant? I strongly recommend for you to read the book. At a minimum, read my notes on the book, The Verbally Abusive Relationship. I can't say enough good things about this book. You can find my notes on my website, thriveafterabuse.com, under book club, I think book club notes. She goes through there and she lists out all of these different types of verbal abuse. And a lot of it's really like covert kind of stuff. So subtle put downs, subtle jabs, criticism, undermining, patronizing, all of these little things that make us feel like maybe we're too sensitive, maybe we're too emotional, maybe we can't take a joke. Is it us? Is it them? I think it'll clear up so many things for you, and it'll give you, I think she lists out 16 different types of kind of subtle forms of verbal abuse. Once you're able to pinpoint it, then you'll be able to see it. And you're like, oh, okay, that's why that bothers me, because that is, criticism, or that like constant criticism, or this is undermining, or this is like cruel humor that's not funny, or this is kind of, what have you. It helps to be able to label it and figure out what exactly it is you're dealing with. Let's see. Brody, great comment. Okay, hold on a second here. Oh, I think there's 2 parts to the comment. Oh, I don't want to lose it if I scroll up to find the first one. Okay. I did. Okay, I found it. So Brody says, I just found your channel. Yeah, I just found your very helpful channel, and I was wondering if you think a narcissist can change their ways. And then he goes on to ask, I ask because I have seen narcissistic tendencies in me that I feel are from my father that I hope I can change. Great question, great comment. Lots and lots of people struggle with this. So we were talking about this a little before. With personality stuff, it's not so black and white. It's not like a person is either pregnant or you're not pregnant. It's not like you have cancer or you don't have cancer. It's not like a person's a narcissist or not a narcissist. There's a lot of, with personality stuff, there's a lot of like gray territory there. So, and with narcissism, it's, it's on a scale. So there's kind of like the degree and the frequency and the level of like how extreme is it? Is it mild, moderate, or severe? And more so than that, because don't get me wrong, any of that's problematic. Like any of that's problematic. But we all have, certain problematic behaviors. Like we all have most people are not fully in alignment. The problem with narcissists is that it's not necessarily so much their behavior, although it is incredibly problematic. What's more problematic is that they don't realize that it's their behavior. So if you're seeing stuff within yourself where you're like, man, you know what? My dad used to do that, and that guy's a real jerk. I don't want to be anything like him. And I wish I did things differently. Or even if you didn't have that role modeled for you and you're like, man, like that, and you look back and you're like, man, I was a total jerk up until I don't know, to women or to friends, or I was bad with money, or like I was really insecure, or, whatever it might be. And you're like, man, I want things to change. The fact that you're seeing that there's a problem with whatever it is that you're doing, that's a really good sign. So, because narcissists they're so deeply unconscious about their behavior that they don't see that they have a problem. So if you're seeing like, man, okay, yeah, there's these things about me that I really want to change, that's a good sign, because you're now aware of it. And awareness of a problem is the first step towards changing it. Many of us were raised in like really dysfunctional homes, and many of us, myself included, and many of us have things about ourselves that we would like to change and that we are working on changing, myself included. So, if you're seeing that it's a problem, there's a term for this, okay? The term is called fleas. It's sort of like you lie down with a dog, you get fleas. If you're raised in a dysfunctional home, or you're in a dysfunctional relationship for any length of time, odds are you're gonna get fleas. And I know that's not the most flattering term, but I think it's a good analogy because it shows, okay, you're gonna pick up some bad stuff that you don't want to pick up. It just kind of rubs off on us. So, but if you're aware of these things, like as they surface, and and life is all about personal growth. The insights that we all had when we were 15 versus when we're 20 versus when we're 30 versus when we're 50 versus when we're 80, or it's going to be this continual process of, it's like peeling this onion back, and like more and more of your behavior is going to make sense. And like your parents' behavior is going to make sense. And your ex's behavior is going to make sense. And, it's just this evolution of personal growth and personal development. So as this stuff's kind of boiling to the surface, we're like, I really want to work on that. I can't believe I didn't see it until now. The fact that you're working on it now is good. So, yeah, there is hope. There's 2 videos. I'll have to link to them in the description. I'd posted about them in the Facebook group, kind of as a little side note here. So the other day I thought, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to watch some episodes of Kitchen Nightmares. It's just kind of good. I don't know, kind of trash TV, but kind of interesting at the same time. And so I came across these 2 episodes that were so like over the top, narcissist, awful, like really great examples of narcissistic behavior in motion. And I had posted the links in the Facebook group, but I'll post, I need to post them on my website group, and then I'll post them in the description as well. And it really shows this behavior in motion, the inability to take criticism, the inability, the grandiosity, the arrogance, the thinking I can do no wrong. Everybody else around me is an idiot and I have it all figured out. The closed-mindedness, the difficult personality where they are their own worst enemy. And, all of their employees or their spouse is just like, this person, their behavior is so obviously problematic, they don't see it. And anybody that questions them, or even though their customers they're getting in fights with their customers, even though people are quitting, even though their spouse is begging them, like they lack that insight. and that ability to introspect and think, maybe I do have a problem. See, we tend to do the opposite. A lot of us tend to think, are we the problem? Narcissists don't ever even get to that point. A lot of them that are like really far, they're lost in a paper bag of themselves, is what it is. Like they're so self-absorbed that like it's hard to even get through to them because you're not sharing the same reality. So I think it's helpful to have kind of examples of this behavior and how it plays out. So it's just validating, because I think in those 2 kitchen nightmare episodes, a lot of us have experienced stuff like that. And we knew it felt uncomfortable and we knew that it wasn't good, but we also couldn't really pinpoint like why it was problematic, especially if there was no yelling or there were no names being called, or there wasn't anything like really concrete. Another interesting kind of aside about that was the kitchen staff. So in this one episode in particular, and it was called Amy's Baking Company, Kitchen Nightmare episode. The gal she was like the waitress or something, was being treated horribly. She's working with these 2 crazy people that run this restaurant that are just like, talk about Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of stuff, just absolutely over the top, like ridiculous. And here's this girl waiting tables, probably getting paid next to nothing. I think the guy was even taking all their tips. It was just the most ridiculous situation. And yet here she is continuing to go to this job and be treated like that. And again, I think it's really important to realize that it's never okay to be treated like that, no matter if it's a relationship or with your parents or with siblings or with friends or with coworkers or with your boss. Like, it's not okay to be used, abused, exploited, or neglected. Like, that environment is not conducive to being healthy. And it broke my heart for this girl because I a lot of it, I remember being and just having jobs like that where, you kind of justify it to yourself and you think, well, but work is supposed to be work. And I guess some bosses are difficult in like justifying and rationalizing this horrible treatment, and the stress and the anxiety. And, there's a lot of jobs out there. Like, nothing is worth your mental health or your physical safety, And so I thought that was kind of a good example to bring up, because I think a lot of us really struggle with settling for crumbs and thinking that we have to stay in jobs where we're treated like dirt. We have to stay in relationships where we're treated like dirt, because oftentimes too, we're not treated like dirt 100% of the time. And so we might think, well, they only treat us bad like 20% of the time. The other 80% is actually pretty decent. It's never okay. Even 20% is a lot. And even 10% is a lot. Even 5%, even 1% is a lot. And it will eventually take its toll on you. So it's important, because generally too, when a person's justified problematic behavior in one area of their life, odds are they've done it in multiple areas of their life. So I think it's a really good idea to take a few steps back, examine, what have some of like really awful jobs, what have been some of your really awful jobs, and why were they awful? What did you put up with that you now realize that that's not healthy, that you would no longer put up with or do? What kind of friendships have you had? Think back to the most significant like friendships that you've had since, elementary school even. How many dynamics did you have where they were very one-sided, where you gave and gave and this person took and took? It very eye-opening. Doris says, "Oh my God, Dana, you read my mind." Yeah, she says, I would always say it's 80-20. Good God. Yeah, I would say that's probably the split for most abusive relationships is about an 80-20, 90-10, 80-20 split. And it's confusing because most, I get it. Like people are like, well, is this like, where is this 20% coming from? Like, did they have a bad day at work? Were they drinking? Are they under stress? Did they not get enough sleep? Like, where did the Mr. Hyde come from? And how can we get back to Dr. Jekyll? And under normal circumstances, right? Like if you're dealing with people, like normal people are solutions oriented. So, that's another thing that we need to realize is not everything is a relationship issue. Not everything takes, that there's always two sides to it, or that one person's behavior is in response or reaction to another person's behavior. Like not everything is a relationship issue. Sometimes it's a personality issue. And, there is no making a relationship work with a narcissist or a sociopath. Like it's going to be all about them all of the time. And we can't communicate enough. We can't walk on enough eggshells. We can't look attractive enough or give them enough attention to make them stay faithful. We can't be nice enough to them to make them not yell. We can't, steer clear of them enough or have them get enough sleep or cook their favorite meal or do whatever to prevent them from yelling at us. Like, because their behavior has nothing to do with our behavior. Their behavior is their own twisted, dysfunctional, backwards personality kind of stuff. And they bring that wherever they go, and they'll be the same way to the next person and the next person and the next person and the next person. It's how they are until they can actually wake up and sincerely realize that they have a major stuff going on. But even then, I want you guys to realize too, awareness is the first step of change. But change still takes a tremendous amount of work. And it's an ongoing process of keeping that. And it's change for anybody is hard because we're aware that it's a problem, but then we can kind of slip into being comfortable. And then all of a sudden, maybe it's not that big of a deal. And, and then we realize, oh no, it's a problem again. But most people don't realize something's a problem until it causes them a lot of pain. Like we were talking about earlier, if you realize that you've gained weight, or maybe that your drinking is a problem, or that drug use is a problem, or, whatever is a problem, it's because we were hit with pain. Like we went to button our pants, or wear our favorite outfit and it didn't fit. It's that kind of those slap in the face moments where you're like, what just happened? Or we get a DUI, or, like something major happens, that it's a wake-up call. That's the other challenge with narcissists, because they never think that it's their fault. They continue to justify things. So they don't, when a person's able to continually justify what they're doing, they don't experience pain. And this is the challenge with anybody changing. It's the challenge, they say like with alcoholics and addicts, like they have to hit rock bottom. If that means they have to get 5 DUIs and get thrown in jail, and it costs them $40,000 in attorney's fees, and they can't drive for 3 years, that's what it means. And for friends and family, like it's hard to watch somebody sink that low to where they hit rock bottom, but they have to get that wake up call. And if we try to intervene, if we try to bail them out, if we, bail them out of jail or lie about, like we're picking them up from the bar, we're preventing them from experiencing pain from their choices, they're not going to hit rock bottom, and then they're never going to sober up, because it requires pain for a person to actually realize that there's a problem and stay motivated enough to actually work towards changing it. So, and it's the same with narcissists, and frankly, it's the same with codependence. And for us to change it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and it's an ongoing thing every single day. Every single interaction with somebody, every single day. It's hard enough for us to change, and we're experiencing ongoing amounts of pain because we're the ones that our boundaries are getting pushed, we're getting taken advantage of, we're being used, abused, exploited, and neglected on a continual basis because many of us have a hard time asserting ourselves. We have a hard time, saying no. We have a hard time. We don't like conflict. We want to be a people pleaser. We have a hard time with that. Our whole lives are basically living in that area of, resentment and anger and bitterness and discomfort. There's a lot of pain that goes along with codependency. And so we're oftentimes so focused on, well, but we don't have the problem. It's this person that has the abusive behavior. So I'm going to spend all my time trying to help them to understand that they're abusive. And it takes a while for a person to understand this. Because that seems like the right thing to do. That seems like the moral thing to do and the ethical thing to do and the healthy thing to do, but it's actually incredibly dysfunctional. And that's contrary to what society says, right? It's this idea family is forever and relationships are forever. And, true love conquers all. And, you just give and give and give. And you want to be with somebody that'll stand by your side no matter what. It's kind of this ride or die mentality. It's very dysfunctional. And this is also the other reason why a lot of other people that might have this mentality don't support you with setting boundaries or walking away from toxic people, because either they've never encountered toxic people or they just don't realize, or they still have that very dysfunctional mindset that, you don't have deal breakers. You're just continually solutions oriented and you stand by your partner no matter what. And that's what, marriage is all about. That's what marriage is all about, just getting dragged through hell. And that's so toxic. So, it's important to realize, when we start waking up from this and realizing, oh, that's a problem. I always thought I was doing the right thing. I always gave and gave and gave. I was very easy to get along with. I worked all these extra shifts when anybody really needed me to. I was really good to my partner and went above and beyond for them. And it's this idea that we have to somehow earn being treated with dignity and respect, that we have to earn their love or earn their loyalty. That's toxic thinking, and that's not true. Yeah, SG says, yes, stop being loyal to an abusive person. Be loyal to yourself. Yeah. Somebody in the support group had also mentioned leaving an abusive person, and and most people struggle with this, feeling guilty about it and asking, how do I leave? How do I leave? And when do I tell them? And if you're struggling with this, I guess just realize that this is very common. There's a lot of guilt that goes along with leaving. And generally it's because the person is setting a boundary for the first time, perhaps ever. And setting boundaries and asserting your wants and needs is really uncomfortable for a while when we first start doing this. There's two different types of guilt out there. There's appropriate guilt and inappropriate guilt. Appropriate guilt is feeling bad when we've done something wrong. And inappropriate guilt is when we feel bad and we haven't done anything wrong. A lot of people that struggle with boundaries feel this, what I call inappropriate guilt for saying no, for basically protecting themselves. That is not, even though you feel guilty, please realize that there's different forms of guilt and that they're not all they don't all stem from the same place. So even though it feels like you're doing something wrong, you're not. There's no need to feel guilty for protecting yourself or doing what you need to do to stay safe and sane. So there's that. And then the other part of that is, and I guess I would encourage you, if you feel guilty about leaving, it's, that's okay. Feel the feeling, but do the right thing anyhow. So you just push through it. And you realize I got to do what I got to do to stay safe and sane. And that's it. Feel the feeling, do it anyhow. So, and then how to leave and when to tell them. I always encourage people, plan ahead as much as you possibly can for it. If you can't plan ahead, that's okay too. Frankly, grab what's important and just and go. Like if it's to that point, everything else can be replaced. And frankly, you're probably going to want to replace it anyhow, because you're not going to want all of the memories and all of it. But when you go to leave, I think it can be helpful to really view it as like a hostage situation. You've got this manipulative person who's manipulated you out of your power and control. And, that's what narcissists do. So you've got this really controlling, domineering person, and then you've got the target of that who's basically being held hostage. They've been manipulated psychologically in many different ways. It's the same with like leaving a hostage situation. Like you don't tell, the captor that you're leaving. Like you don't have that discussion because there's no point, and they're going to try to, undermine your efforts to leave. So realize, okay, this is very much like a hostage situation here. I need to get my stuff and I need to go. And I don't need to get them. I don't need their approval. I don't need to get them to understand. I don't need them to support the decision. I'm not going to get closure. I just need to get what's important and get the heck out of here. I don't owe them anything. I don't need to feel bad about it. This is a very controlling, toxic situation. So I think if you can kind of see it from that point of view, it can be a lot. It can be the validation of, yeah, this is a big deal. This is problematic. Abusive relationships have a heck of a lot more in common with a hostage situation than they do with a relationship. So, wait, hold on. We've got a troll. People are so funny. Okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up here. New Beginnings. Hi. New Beginnings says, my sister doesn't really get why I have to lose contact with my parents. I've tried to keep her in my life, but in the past, she has been a flying monkey, but doesn't remember. And here's the thing with siblings that's so weird, is every sibling is going to have a different dynamic with their parent, with each parent, and with each sibling. So even though everybody's growing up under the same house, they're growing up in a totally different family. And because again, oftentimes if you're the target of abuse by one parent, odds are, even though that might be being done in front of the other siblings, they're not on the receiving end of it. So watching it happen to somebody else versus having it happen to you are two very different things. And so it's very easy for them to to justify what they're experiencing. Because to fully accept the truth that, mom or dad is an abusive jerk, that's a hard truth to swallow. Because if a person realizes that, then that means they actually need to distance themselves from that person. But because breaking that bond, walking away from a parent or a sibling, that's one of the hardest, it's one of the deepest bonds that a person has. And it's one of the hardest to walk away from. And So it's really, really common for families to justify all kinds of like outrageous behavior in the name of, well, that person's family. Like it's common for people to have a family member that's a child molester. They might have even molested members that might have even molested them. And later on in life, that person's like, well, but we're still going to have, you know, Uncle Joe or Aunt Sarah over for Thanksgiving or for Christmas because they're family, even though they've been lied to, stolen from, sexually molested, that, you know, and on and on and on and on and on, because they're family. It's very toxic ideology. And so that's kind of like an extreme example, but you know, it's very, back to your situation, New Beginnings. It's very common for siblings to not support other siblings and be like, well, that's just dad. Like he had a really bad childhood. Can't you just get over it? Like, where's your compassion? You just need to forgive. You need to be the stronger one. You know, it's your issue. It's your problem that you're not okay with him abusing you. See, what's wrong with you? Like, where's your compassion? And when you say it like that, you're like, this, what? Like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And, you know, the reality is you don't need permission to move yourself to a place of safety and sanity. And you don't need to defend yourself to your sibling either. You know, you can very firmly just state, you know, I need to do what I need to do in order to keep myself safe and sane. This relationship isn't working for me and I'm not going to do it anymore. Please don't bring this up again. And of course they generally will. So like prepare yourself for what you're going to say to that, because then you'll start getting like, as things progress, well, you know, mom's not getting any younger, or, you know, dad has cancer, or, you know, dad really needs you right now, or mom, you know, really wants to make amends, or mom really wishes you'd see. So there's all kind of this like pity and sympathy and things that push people into reopening, trying to reopen communication. But at the end of the day, you don't owe anybody anything, you know? And if you wouldn't tolerate this behavior by anybody else in your life, then it's a problem if you're tolerating it by a family member. Just because a person's family doesn't give them a free pass to use, abuse, exploit, or neglect you. Abuse is abuse. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Let's see here. Yeah, SG says hanging around with flying monkeys is re-traumatizing. Yeah, hanging around with really dysfunctional people in general is re-traumatizing and exhausting. I was at an event, this was like a year or so ago, and without getting into too much detail, it was between some family, and like one person was like raging on the other, and it was, I've never heard I've never heard one person talk to another like this before in my life. And I used to work at a domestic violence shelter, and I've been in enough awful relationships. I still like, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous and awful. And it was that moment, it made me so sad, because it's like, I cannot be around that. Like, I will not be around that. It was heartbreaking. Kids were screaming, kids were crying. It was this whole moment totally ruined the trip. It was just awful. And it wasn't even at me. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was just, that's what was going on in the house. And it had been a pattern. I just had never seen it to that extent. I'd never seen it before. I'd heard about it, but I'd never seen it to that extent. And it just was very clear, like, nope, I'm not even going to be around this. It's just too stressful. And when you're around people that are enjoyable to be around, oh my goodness, life is just so much easier. It's so much smoother. It's enjoyable. And you don't feel like, you're not spending all of this mental energy, like rehashing what happened and wishing you had done things differently, or wishing things had gone down differently, or there's just none of that. Brittany asks, can narcissism run in families? Yes, it oftentimes does. And I think really it's more, it's kind of that argument, is it nature versus nurture? Is it something genetic, or is it something that's more environmental? My guess would be it's a combination of both, but I think more often than not, it's environmental. It's so difficult. If a person's raised in a den of dysfunction, odds are they're not going to come out like, a healthy person. They're going to have that's most of us, right? Like most of us, I think very few people have a healthy, empowering, nurturing childhood. I think we all tend to leave childhood with some sort of childhood wound. And most of us leave with like multiple childhood wounds. There's always work to be done, like to repair our childhood, I think, whether or not we realize it or not. With, narcissists, there's so many factors. There's just so many factors at play. It's so hard to say. I mean, I've known a couple in my life. There's like a handful that I'm thinking of that seemed to have pretty like normal childhoods. Like their parents were, which I think now that's even abnormal. Their parents were married. They, I wouldn't say that they were even spoiled. Like they seemed to just have a pretty constant childhood. The one guy that I mentioned, that his behavior was so awful, like creepy and awful. And then I was proven right when I broke up with him. Like he was the guy that situation sparked me to actually start my website. His father was famous, and like regionally famous. So not like really Hollywood famous. And his father died of a sudden heart attack, and his whole life changed. Like all the money stopped, all the fame stopped, everything stopped. He was the youngest sibling. The other siblings seemed fine, very well adjusted. That guy was a total psycho. So, did it stem from that? I don't know. He had a pretty, compared to most people, he had a pretty ideal life, and pretty ideal like adult life too. Why is he the way he is? I have no idea. I've known other people that didn't even have like that level of trauma and still were kind of on that problematic narcissistic spectrum. And then I've known a lot that I've worked with a lot, with patients and stuff that have had, an extensive trauma history and have had, antisocial personality disorders, and have gone on to commit all kinds of really awful crimes. And I don't know if there's been enough like research to really say one way or the other, but yeah, I don't know. And I think all we can do with children is to talk to them about boundaries and healthy boundaries, and to also let them know, like, that there's going to be a lot of things in, like, to give them like a realistic perspective of life, that there's a lot of pain in life, and how to and helping to like prepare them for that, instead of like protecting them from that. I think so many parents and religions and schools try to really like protect people from life. And I think the opposite approach is much more effective. And, you know, and saying, okay, let's prepare you for this. Like, this is what might happen. So like, how are you going to handle this? Like how, you know, paying attention, how does it feel when something's off? How does it feel when somebody touches you in an uncomfortable way? How do you handle that? You know, and that's just kind of like emotional, you know, health kind of 101. But then on top of that, you know, how do you handle it? Just kind of other major life events. You know, how do you handle getting bullied in school? How do you handle having a difficult teacher or a difficult boss, or, you know, balancing your checkbook, or like any of these life events? Because so much of the stuff isn't discussed. And then when people start encountering it and they have problems, people often think it's just them. Like everybody else has it all figured out, but we're the one, right? Like we're the idiot that doesn't know how to do all these things. And that's so not true. And so I don't know, I think to kind of just setting kids up to succeed at a young age is very helpful. Yeah. Kristen says, I believe part of the solution is to break the cycle of abuse with children and parents, supporting and teaching parents of young children. Yes. Yes, I agree completely. And, you know, talking about like, what is healthy communication? Like, what is unhealthy communication? What is, you know, like, what is abuse? Like, what are the different kinds of abuse? How do they go down? Like, what are examples of verbal abuse? What are examples of, you know, physical abuse or financial abuse, or, you know, dispelling a lot of these myths that it's, if it's family, that you need to continually forgive them and keep them in your life. That, like, teaching kids, it's okay. You need to do what you need to do to stay safe and sane. If you've got somebody at school or at work or a friend, you know, like if they're mean to you, then that's like, you don't need people like that in your life. And you know, again, so many of these words are, we talked about this before, like so many of these words are so misused. Like the word friend, we oftentimes, especially in this country, in the United States, we'll use that word friend to kind of be this umbrella term for just somebody that we know, somebody that we talk to. Like, oh, that's my friend from work. Oh yeah, that's my friend from when I lived, you know, in California. Or yeah, that was my friend from school. And like, it's not the same. And the thing that trips us up is because we're using the same word to mean different things, the way we're processing that is very different and can be very problematic. So just because you know a person doesn't mean that they're a friend. You know, a friendship takes trust. It takes being treated with dignity and respect. It takes time. You know, so I think it's important to realize, okay, there's like an acquaintance, there's a person that we talk to that we don't like. You know, we need to be able to differentiate kind of between like, especially between like a friend and an enemy. Like if somebody is actively working against you, if they're cheating, if they're lying, if they've stolen your social security number and opened up, you know, utility bills in your name, like that's not a friend and that's not family. Like that's an enemy. And it's really important that we see that this person is actively working against you. They cannot be trusted. It would be foolish to trust them and to take appropriate action. So, yeah, New Beginning says it's like the word love is overused. Yeah, and that's a big, red flag oftentimes with narcissists is they are often very quick to talk about love and marriage and wanting, babies and these kinds of things. It can come across as maybe very flattering, but it also comes across as very immature. Like here's this grown person saying that they love me and we're on like the 4th date, or they're talking about wanting to marry me, or they're hinting about these things. Like they're not acting like an adult. They're acting like a teenager, like a silly teenager in love. Not even a teenager, like a silly teenager, like a naive, ignorant teenager in love. That's a red flag. And, healthy, mature adults realize what they have to offer. They realize that everything is easy to get into and that it's harder to get out of. They realize that getting married, having a baby, like moving in together, that these things are major commitments not to be taken lightly and not to be be made on the fly. And that while movies and TV and society thinks it's really romantic to, be so in love, and then, by the end of the first month that you're running off to Vegas to get married, it's not. Like it's highly, highly problematic. The reality, the odds of a person actually seeing that situation and that relationship clearly is slim to none. Most people are blinded by these feelings of like intoxication with, I've met this amazing person. That lasts like the first 90 days. And then like the reality of them and of relationship starts to settle in. And there's so much more that needs to go into it, right? Like, what are this person's morals and values? Not what they say they are, what are they living? Because this is another thing. A lot of people, they'll put their guard down. This person will be like, well, I'm a Christian, or I'm vegetarian, or I'm, I don't know, Buddhist or Muslim or what have you, or I'm in the military, or I'm a police officer. These, where another person might think, well, I can trust them, they're in the military, or I can trust them, they're Christian. And we're very quick, this is just a human being trait, we're very quick to think they're like me. If I can trust me, I can instantly trust them. And predators are relying on this, especially online predators. I would say probably faith and military service and kind of, like any type of wealth are things that are often tools used to lure somebody in. Especially religion. It's so common for a person to just tell a person, I'm so glad I found you. I'm this really good Christian person, and I've been looking for you, and all I want to do is just find somebody to love, and I just was so taken by you. And if the target of this is thinking, this seems a little too much too soon. It's the fish jumping in the boat. This person's really laying it on thick. But maybe I have issues with my self-esteem. Maybe it's because of my past relationship. And then they begin second guessing themselves. And then the person's like, I just really believe in God. And I go, I run a group at my church every single weekend. And I'm also part of the youth ministry there. And they're saying all these things, which on the surface, it can make this person feel like, wow, I've really met this amazing spiritual person. But then the only way to tell the difference between fool's gold and real gold is, time and experience, and then just kind of knowledge of your emotions and knowledge of their behavior. But generally time, like if you can start to see, like, what are their actions? They're talking about how Christian they are, but yet they're not really living in a very Christian way, or not really living in a very, insert religion here kind of way. Anybody can claim to be anything, and it's their actions are all that matters, because they might fully. My grandfather was a minister, and he was a narcissist, and he was a complete womanizer, and he was a terrible human being to those who knew him. To his congregation, well, up until they really knew him, until they would run him off. He was charming, he was charismatic, he was seemed like a really good Christian. Even for me growing up with him, all I ever heard was that guy read the Bible nonsense. It was the weirdest thing. He read the Bible. It's like he didn't even have a personality. All he would ever do was cite scripture. Very, very strange. I really think that he fully felt like he was like the right hand of God, and that I don't think he ever realized that he ever did anything wrong. You know, but those who knew him, I mean, and over time, he always creeped me out. And I'm so glad that we lived several states away. So I only saw him, probably less than 10 times in my whole life. So thank God, because he was a creepy dude. But, I think a lot of people, he flew under their radar, and that's the kind of stuff that happens. So, pay attention to what people say versus how they act. It's a big thing. That was kind of a tangent. Sorry. Okay, Truth Seeker says, mine was seemingly very open and vulnerable, speaking about loyalty and commitment, and later betraying that very concept. Yeah. Yep, I agree. They oftentimes do. I mean, most of those covert narcissists they'll talk about how they've been so hurt before. They'll talk about how their like awful childhood. They'll talk about their previous partner, cheating on them or being jealous or what have you. But what they're really doing is they're grooming you. They're teaching you, like, don't be like them. And then they lay it on so thick where you feel like you found this perfect person. And then when things start to turn, you're kind of in this scramble to win back their love and their affection. But it was never there to begin with. It was just all a ruse. Maria says, do you think you'll know that red flags tend to surface within the first 90 days? Do you guys normally agree with that timeline? Yeah, I do. I mean, some people will say, that their partner didn't start becoming abusive until they had their first child, or until they bought a house, or until they were really locked in. Here's what I think about that. I think what tends to happen is they become concretely abusive after they have their partner locked in. My guess would be is that there were signs there, even if it was like a gut feeling. There were things there that if they were to be honest with themselves and look back, that they'd be able to point to, well, yeah, this one, the way that he treated the waitress was really weird, or the way that she cried about at a funeral for a coworker she didn't know was really weird, or this one comment was really strange. There tends to be red flags along the way. Here's the thing with red flags. Red flags, many of us, right? We're talking about, like, we're waiting for that concrete thing that we can point to and say, there's a red flag. It's red and it's big and it's waving. Red flags aren't something that we see. They're very rarely something that we see. They're very rarely concrete. Red flags are something that we more often feel. It's that funny feeling of, that's really weird. It's really weird that guy told me he made this big effort to tell me how much of a successful entrepreneur he is. And yet he shows up wearing clothes that don't fit in this like ratty car. That's kind of weird. And you might not be able to prove it, right? I mean, anybody can justify that and be like, well, maybe he, is very frugal and that's why he has all this money, or like, you can justify it, but it's still that initial feeling of that doesn't line up. Or this guy was sitting here telling me how Christian he was and how devoted he was to his wife, but yet he seems to like ogle every single waitress that walks by. Or this other gal says, how all of her exes have been so crazy, but yet whenever I'm out with her at the bar, I feel like I almost get into a bar fight with all of these different men. She says she hates drama and she hates conflict, but yet I always seem to find myself right in the middle of it with her. Or, like it's just things that don't add up. Or you find out that they said that they were never married, but then you meet their parents and their mom starts talking about their ex-wife. And then you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought you weren't ever married before. And they say, no, I told you about her. Or they're saying things like they're denying what you know to be true. Or they're saying things that are kind of mean, but then they're telling you that you're too sensitive. Like these are the flags. It's more of whether or not I think we see them for what they are is the bigger question, because so many of us don't. Scuba Girl says, the hardest thing for me to move forward with was the feeling like he took my best traits and turned them on its head. My trust, my faith, my optimism, my romantic ideals, etc. Let's talk about this for a second. So I think a lot of people struggle with this, and they have a hard time not feeling really bitter and angry, especially if they get the diagnosis of PTSD. And they're like, this is not fair. This is not fair. Like, I was abused and now I have this extra burden that I have to carry, where I feel like, I have a hard time. Like, not only did I go through hell, but now I have the after effects of this. Like, I have a hard time trusting. I'm afraid I'm never going to find love. I'm afraid to love. I'm having trouble sleeping. I've gained a lot of weight. I've lost a lot of weight. Like, my whole life is turned upside down. And I'll tell you from my experience, because I really struggled with this, like with trust and kind of faith in people in general. And I know a lot of people struggle with faith in God. Like, how could this happen to me? Optimism, romantic ideals. It took me a handful of years to realize that I was really out of alignment with a lot of those things to begin with. Let me just give you some examples. So with trust, I was really angry. I was like, I want to go back to the old me, the old Dana that just took people at face value, that instantly trusted them, that was able to just make friends with people really quickly. And we would have these amazing, really deep conversations. And it was so great. And that I could, go on dates with guys, and that I wasn't second guessing them or their intentions, or wondering if they were going to lead a double life, or if they really were who they said that they were. And I was really angry about that. It took me a handful of years to realize trusting people right out of the gate like that is never healthy. It might not have ever caused us harm before, but it would have eventually. And had it not been that abusive person, it would have been another one. When I realized that it's not, because again, like, we have all these messages of like, people are inherently good, and like, we just have to trust them, and that, you've got to trust sometime. To a person who's out of alignment with that, and this might sound harsh, and please know that I don't mean it to be, but if we're out of alignment with that, if we've been trusting a person before trust has been established, that's a problem. And it takes oftentimes a relationship like this to almost like slow us way down to a point where we've got to reevaluate what that is. And so I think it's really helpful to realize trust is something that's earned. It happens over a period of time. During that period of time, it's consistent, appropriate behavior. That's what leads to a healthy degree of trust. It's not something that happens within the first week of knowing somebody. It might not even be something that happens, and it slowly builds over time. But generally after like the first, handful of dates, then that, then that different degrees of that trust can start to, or friendship or what have you, can start to be developed. That was aha moment, a big aha moment for me, and I think for a lot of people. The second part to that is faith in God, faith in other people. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to say about this. I think first and foremost, if a person's having this kind of spiritual crisis with like, how could God do this to me? And feeling angry at God. I think here's just kind of my take on it. Don't let this event keep you from knowing God. If anything, take this event, and this is the time to lean more into your spiritual faith. I think we go through these things in life. Life is all of, like we're talking about earlier, life is a lot of life is pain, and it's all towards personal growth. Like we can take a lot from this and become even better and stronger and wiser for it. We can use it for our highest and greatest good and the highest and greatest good of others. And, it's oftentimes that things have been out of alignment with us for a long time that we were never, ever aware of. And these relationships will tend to bring it all to the surface. And it's intense. It's intense when we start kind of connecting the dots and see how all of this is really related. It's also really common for people to lose. And please, real quick, please do not misunderstand what I'm saying as that I'm saying that we are somehow responsible for being abused. We're not. It's not okay what happened to us by any stretch. And I think, frankly, anybody can get roped into a relationship or a business deal or a friendship or what have you with a narcissist. They're really, really manipulative people, and they exploit people's vulnerabilities. We all have vulnerabilities. So please, like, nobody deserves to be treated this way. A lot of people lose faith in other people. When you realize, wow, there's some like really evil people walking this planet, and they can come across as charming and good people. It's terrifying. It's terrifying when we realize that, and it can make a person just want to stay inside. There are a lot of really good people out there. There really, really are. And frankly, I think kind of the upside to this, if there is an upside, is a lot of the people in the chat, in the support groups, are really kind, considerate, compassionate people. And you might find like, wow, where have these people been all my life? I've been looking around for caring, compassionate, empathic people. And now here they all are. Like it's just weird. It's weird how like you can kind of find your people in all of this. Optimism, that can take a little while to get back. I have found, for me personally, I've always been a fairly optimistic person, even with like PTSD, even with all of this stuff. I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy to have a healthy degree of skepticism about people, about situations, about what have you. I think the more you learn about manipulative behavior and predatorial behavior, the more, at first it'll terrify you, but then you'll get to this point where you're like, okay, I get it. I'm able to see this clearly, most likely for the first time ever. And you're going to start seeing this kind of behavior in a lot of people in a multitude of environments. Once it's like the Matrix. Like once you take that pill, like that red pill, and like you're aware of it, you're awake, you can't unsee it. And there's other people that are also awake to it. And then there's a lot of people that are asleep to it still. Once you're aware of it and you're aware of like what it is and how to protect yourself, and you've gotten rid of all of this like well-intended bad advice, and you're thinking clearly, and your emotions are in tune with like your logic and your critical thinking, and you're no longer feeling confused and introspective, and like once you get everything kind of on track and lined up, and you don't feel bad about keeping yourself safe and sane, and then you start moving full speed ahead. And I think you'll find that you'll have even like more, you have so much more faith in yourself and in your ability to navigate your environment than you ever did before. Real quick aside, a lot of people will say, they're like, okay, why do I keep attracting these people? And they get really upset if another narcissist comes into their life. It's like we were just talking about, they're highly manipulative people. And they can slip under anybody's radar. This is why it's so important to go slow when you're meeting new people. So if you're going slow enough, then you're not emotionally or financially or physically or what have you invested in that person. You kind of like, here's them and here's you. Like there's healthy boundaries. It's not so like enmeshed right away. Like you're moving slowly, you're paying attention to their words and their actions and their behavior and kind of how you feel and all of that. And then, because you've been down this road before, you know how something feels when it's off. And so if something, you start seeing those strange things, like that's really weird. This person just I could have sworn they said yesterday that they had 4 new clients, and then they just told our friend at lunch that they had 30 new clients. Like you'll start seeing that mask slip. You're like, this person's, they're lying. They're lying about stuff that doesn't matter. Because you've gone down this road before, you'll know, I'm not going to justify this or try to rationalize this. These are my signs that I need to start distancing myself from this person, because this person's got some problematic behavior. And if you were to want to keep moving forward with that person, you've got to throw this relationship into like neutral or like first gear and move way back up before trying to move forward again. So once you realize, because it's not so much about necessarily keeping narcissists out of your life. Frankly, they're out there, and it's about getting rid of them as soon as you see them, or toxic people in general. It's about getting rid of them once you spot one in your life. And it takes practice. I think you'll find that with practice and observation and like learning about manipulative behavior, you're going to start getting better and faster at getting them out of your life. It takes practice. Okay. Then the last part was about romantic ideals. This is a big bubble to burst for like a lot of people, because we all have these Hollywood ideas about love, and sweep you off your feet, whirlwind romance, perfect partner, this intensity. And those romantic ideals, a lot of it's immature, it's not healthy. That level of intensity is often not sincere. It's grandiose, and frankly, it tends to be reserved for narcissists and sociopaths. Healthy people don't do that. So it's more about changing or like modifying romantic ideals to realize that to not confuse love bombing with love, and to realize that the true romance is consideration, it's appreciation, it's the little things that are done on a fairly regular basis, letting the person know, hey, I was thinking about you, you're important to me. It's not these over the top grand gestures of, I'm going to propose to you at the top of the Eiffel Tower and put it all over Facebook with the 3-carat diamond ring that I can't afford, but that you're not going to find out about until we're married. And now we're 50,000 in debt, you know, like it's not that. Like it's, you know, it's honesty, it's appreciation, it's sincerity, it's consistent behavior. It's, you know, little things done on like a regular basis. And once your romantic ideals kind of shift to realize this is what it means to actually be loved, like to be appreciated. Like love is synonymous with appreciation. Love is not synonymous with love bombing or abuse. And when you can realize that, asking yourself, like, okay, am I being treated with love? Like if I tell a person, I love you, you're basically saying, I appreciate you. I'm showing my appreciation of you. If somebody's telling you, I love you, they're appreciating you, and they're doing it through their actions, consistent actions. It's not on again, off again actions. It's not appreciation and then abuse, and then appreciation and then abuse. It's a brand new way of being. Yeah, Elise says, why do I have the feeling that there are a lot of narcissists out there and they all know about this epidemic, like an open secret? Yeah, I know, it's crazy that it does feel like an epidemic. And I just had no idea, never in my wildest nightmares would I have imagined that it was such a problem. I had no idea what I was getting into when I started making my YouTube videos. I can't tell you how much anxiety I had for like a year when I began, you know, my email inbox was just getting flooded with emails from people all over the world, all kinds of people. I was getting emails from, you know, people that were in obviously like in abusive relationships. I was getting emails from, I got one from a rabbi one time. I got one from like a district judge, you know, like therapists, like all, I mean, any age, any gender, any color, any nationality, any religion, like you name it. It was totally wild. I felt like a first responder in an accident, but like it just didn't stop. Like there were just all of these car wrecks on the road. It was just awful. It was so much, it was awful for like a year. I had no idea. No idea that there were this many people out there that were like wandering around in the fog. I mean, I really did. I just didn't think there would be this many. Diane says, my parents keep abusing me. There's zero appreciation. It's constant expectation to serve them all of the time. Yeah, I think that's very common for a lot of children that have narcissists as parents. There's some support groups out there specifically for like daughters of narcissistic mothers or children of narcissistic parents that you might find a lot of like validation and clarity and strategy in joining those groups. There's a handful on Facebook that might, and I'm sure like on the internet in general, but just as a reminder real quick, if you guys are going to be joining Facebook groups, it's really a good idea to create a fake account with a fake name and a fake picture, and some like fake content on there, because if you've got people that are watching your account and you're joining groups for like narcissistic abuse or whatever, it tends to catch the eye of narcissists and flying monkeys, and it can cause a lot of problems. So, but I'll tell you, as an administrator of a support group, we also try to screen out spammers. So we try to make sure the account is legit. So you just want to make sure that you have, some content in there that seems like it's related to narcissistic abuse or what have you. And then, to like join groups that way, and only don't befriend anybody that's friends with your other profile. Like just use that account for support groups. Okay. Okay, guys, we are past the 3-hour point. So let's see. Let me see. Let me see if I did it right. I was going to get a bell because we're going to end with a little mini meditation tonight. And I downloaded an app, but I don't know if I know how to use it. No, I don't. Okay. I will have a better chime thing for next time, for sure. So let's just sit quietly for like the next minute or so and just fully relax your body and just close your eyes and just focus on sending out like healing energy from you to other people in the chat, people in the world, people that are watching this video tomorrow. Just sending that healing energy out to them and feeling that healing energy as it's coming back to you. So just take a deep breath and just relax and just be in the moment. Just breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and out. And just send that healing energy out into the world. Imagine it as a white, glowing light that's full of peace and calm and everything that is good and right. And it glows brighter and brighter. And it just makes you feel so good inside. And you feel at peace. And sending that energy out to other people. Anybody that's on your mind right now. Other people in the chat or out in the world. And feeling that healing, peaceful, loving energy come back to you. And just know that you are loved and that you matter. And that you are not alone. And feeling that white, glowing light, that powerful, amazing energy just expand within you until you feel yourself like a a giant glowing white light. And you feel so healthy and whole and peaceful. Like a big energetic hug. Okay, and when you're ready, open your eyes and keep that light within you. And know that that peace and that energy and that love, that's who you truly are. And never let anybody take that away from you. So thank you guys so much for joining me this week. And I hope to see you next week, same time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And just know that you matter, and there's only one of you, that you have gifts to offer this world, and that's the whole purpose of you being here, is finding out what they are and then sharing them with the world. So with that said, I just want you guys to know, as always, you are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you guys next week. Okay, bye.